Okay. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome to sightedmoon.com. I'm Stuart Wilson, your host for this service. Joseph Dumond is in the United Kingdom this week with friends sharing the message of the Jubilee cycles and what is to come very soon in this 120th Jubilee, with the next sabbatical year starting so very soon in the coming weeks. Joe and Randy are traveling with the brethren and have been promoting the messages of Jehovah through the Sighted Moon Ministry. Please continue lifting them up in prayer and that Jehovah will open the eyes and ears of the people. Today is the 19th day of the 12th month in the year 5858 after the creation of Adam, based on the wild barley sighting in Israel and Aviv 1, which occurred on March 5th, 2022. We are in the 6th year of the 4th sabbatical cycle of drought, famine, and pestilence, and the 27th year of the 120th Jubilee cycle. We are also in the 3rd year tithe for the widows and orphans. It is February 11th, 2023 on the Gregorian calendar in North America at this time. This is our Shabbat service. Thank you very much for joining us. We have worshiped in song led by Ella. We have approached Jehovah in prayer led by Sombra. We have heard the Aaronic blessing recited by Scott and Shauna. Thank you, Ella, Sombra, Scott and Shauna, and Rebecca and Shane, and all of you who are with us today. If you are seeing this during the week on video, we invite you to come join us live on Saturdays at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in North America. Coordinates are in our weekly newsletter, so please subscribe at sightedmoon.com. Now, our regularly scheduled Torah readings for this week are Numbers 12, Job chapters 33 through 35, and Romans 1. However, we have a very special conversation topic today, as well as a small teaching today. And so we may not have time to get to our Torah readings today. And so in a few minutes, we'll have Shane introducing our guest speakers for today. But before that, Jenny will open in prayer.
Yahweh, Almighty King and Creator, I thank you for today. I thank you for the blessing that Sabbath is, that you call us into your goodness. I thank you, Father, for your Aleph, your awesome plan that we see in Torah, that is contained in your Bet. Father, I ask that you allow us to gimel to your ways, that we'd be on your path, that we'd walk the way that you call us to walk as we enter into your Dalet and choose to be your people as we continue to be obedient and do your instructions, that we can highlight and emphasize your ways and express your words in awesome ways that you give us strength to do, that we can connect to you as your Wa, that we can enter into oath with you. And Father, that your Zion is our protection. We are guarded by the oath that we take. We are guarded by your words and your power in your Het, in your exclusive protected area. For you have promised by your promise, Yah, of your Tet that is sealed and official. Father, by your Yod, your hand, your active participation in our lives, by your Kaf, your hand that guards us, but also gives us your instructions, your Lamed, that we can come to know in your Torah, that we can participate in your Mem, your wonderful I just lost that meaning. Anyway, and that noon will spring forth to life, that your ways will just be seen and apparent in our lives. Father, as we walk on your Samach, as we follow your commissioned principles, may we iron your ways carefully, that we'd observe and do and see your ways and want to follow you, that your your words and our mouths would work together and we proclaim your greatness, that your Zadi, your life of resurrection would be seen and apparent in our lives as we koof and look to your ways, because that is such a higher way than we can even imagine, that we could be called into resh, your righteousness, that we would proclaim your majesty, that shin, the dispensing of benefits as we're obedient and continue to follow in your Torah and your promises of Tav, your mark of your covenant. I thank and praise you for your goodness today, and I proclaim your greatness. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much, Jenny. And so we have two portions today, two guest speakers or groups today. Our first is Ben Beuno. So Shane, if you could introduce our first speaker.
Sure. And thank you, Jenny, for that beautiful prayer. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So we have Benedict Beuno. He is from the Isle of the Sea in the Philippines. It is roughly 2:42 in the morning there, so he got up early to do this for us. He met Joseph personally when he visited the Philippines last year, and he's also met Pauline in Australia. She has helped him with learning. He is a civil engineer by profession and a property estate agent. He has been in the Torah walk for about 5 years, and he's teaching is beginning of the year. So please welcome Benedict Beuno. Thank you for coming on. Appreciate it.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Should I do the screen share, right?
Yes, go ahead.
So I think I'm good to Shabbat Shalom again, everyone. My name is Benedict Beuno. So this teaching is a reference from Sighted Moon from Joseph Dumont. Some of you, or most of you already know this topic. This is a refresher to some or a new to others. Thanks to Sister Pauline Riardon Benjes, who helped me whenever I have questions about this topic, and so many other things. I met her when she visited our country in the year 2019. For me, it's all start from the revelation of the Sabbath, is what the Sabbath is. At least that's for me, the Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath, the cycle of 7. Sabbath means rest, number 7, or in Hebrew, Sheba. Sheba, Hebrew word Sheba, which also means oath. Every time we keep the Sabbath, we are keeping our oath to Jehovah. We are sevening ourselves, starting from Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath, 7-day period. From there, I was moved to know and curious in many things, such as knowing how the day starts, how to start the month, and how to start the year biblically. Today, this year, we are at the year 5858, almost to the very end of the biblical year. How did we know that it is 5858? How do we prove it? The key verses are 2 Kings 19:29. And this shall be assigned to you. Hold on for a while. It's blocking my view. Okay. I cannot move the. Anyway, this shall be assigned to you. You shall eat this year such as grows of yourself, and in the second year what springs from the same. Also in the third year, sow and reap, plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them, which is also the encounter of King Hezekiah with Sennacherib. And second reference key verse is Leviticus 25. Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath to Jehovah. The tribes of Israel entered the promised land, that event that year. These following events happen in our history with the help of the prism artifacts, or some call it stele, and even tombstone which proves the year by simply adding up the year forward to the present day and backward to the creation of Adam. So now, presently, we are in the still 6th year, heading towards the beginning of the 7th year, the coming sabbatical year. We are in the 4th sabbatical cycles. Also, we are in the 27th year of the 120th Jubilee cycle. We are in the 19th day of the 12th month, the sabbatical cycle of sword, famine, and pestilence. Even we are in the 3rd year tithe. So now, question is, when and how to start the biblical new year? For a start, it involves 2 witnesses. What are those? The sun and the moon. And also it is connected to the land of Israel. The sun role or functions, it drives the weather, ocean currents, seasons, and climate makes plant life possible through photosynthesis. Without the sun's heat and life on Earth would not exist. The moon makes Earth a more livable planet by moderating our home planet's wobble on its axis, leading to a relatively stable climate. It also causes tides, creating a rhythm that has guided humans for thousands of years. The position of the moon helps us to determine the month and day and even hour. It takes 27 days, 7 hours, and 43 minutes for our moon to complete one full orbit around the Earth. This is called the sidereal month and is measured by our moon's position relative to distant fixed stars. The moon displays these phases one after the other as it moves through its cycle each month. However, it takes our moon about 29.5 days to complete the one cycle of phases from new moon to new moon. It helps us determine what day we are in the month. Moon means month as well. It's all connected. It's all tied and connected too. Here's the verse in reference to our 2 witnesses. Genesis 1:14-19. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons, and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth." And it was so. Then God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the nights. He made the stars also. God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and morning were the 4th day. The biblical year begins with the first new moon after the barley in Israel reaches the stage in its ripeness called Abib. Because of this, it is important to check the state of the barley crops at the end of the 12th month. If the barley is Abib at this time, then the following new moon is Hodesh Ha-Abib, or the new moon of the Abib. If the barley is still immature, we must wait another month and then check the barley again at the end of the 13th month. The biblical year, few words we need to take a look on. So we need to take a look on the new moon, the first word. Second one is the barley, and the third one is Abib. So in Hebrew, moon means Kodesh, no? Kodesh, from H2318, the new moon, or by implication, a month, new moon. So when you say moon, it's connected to the month. So the new moon or Kodesh in Hebrew, so this is what it looks like, or we call it sliver of the moon. So we need to see first the first reflection of the sun to the moon to declare a new moon. It must be visible to the naked eye. So in Exodus 12:2, this month shall be your beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. So that's our another verse reference. So Exodus 12:2. This month, when you say this, specifically this word this, that is referring to the specifically a something or pointing to. No? So month, which is in 23 H2320 for our reference. Moving on, Rosh, no, or the head, or the beginning. As you can see from H2 7218, or Rosh in Hebrew. Beginning, or in Hebrew word is Rosh, from an unused root, apparently meaning to shake, or the head, time, beginning, chief, first, forefront, end, head, principal, or top. The root word for Rosh is Rishon, no? Rishon, from H7221, means first, time, rank, beginning, first. Let's consider the word year, the year, no? It's Shana, from H8141. Shana means the second form being feminine. A year as a revolution of time. Full age, long year, or year. So Shana means a cycle of time. So now let's go to our next word, barley. So this the barley look likes. So why do we need the barley to determine the beginning of the year? It's simply because for the wave shape offering, as we reference to Leviticus 23:10-11. That's why we need the barley in reference to this. Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when you have come into the land which I give to you, and shall reap the harvest of it, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest, and he shall wave the sheaf before Jehovah to be received for you. On the next day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. So that's our reference verse. That's why we need and observe the barley. From this verse itself, it is clearly that the barley, which was Abib at the beginning of the month, has become harvest ready 15 to 21 days later. So let's go to our next word, Abib. So what does Abib means? It is a stage or pace or state or period which involves time or timing. Stage or pace of what? The development of the barley crops. Also, it's ripening of barley or spring season. So that's the Abib means, ripening of barley or spring season. Let's go to Deuteronomy 16:1. Observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover to the Lord your God. For in the month of Abib, the Lord your God brought you out of Egypt by night. So the month of Abib is the beginning of the feast, no? Of the unleavened bread or the Passover. It's the month of Abib where the Passover begins. So the barley looks like from 70 to 79 days. Another image for barley from 81 to 89 days. Then this is our visual image representation of different stages of wheat. No? As down below, as you can see, the number, it refers to the number of days from 10, from 20 to 26, then to 30 days. That's a stage of tillering. Then the next stage will be the stem extension, which is from 31 days to 45 days. Then the next stage would be heading, from 50 to 58 days. Then the last one will be ripening stage, which is 75 to 100 days. So another reference, our chart for this, as you can see on the down below, on the down far left, from 0 days to 11 days, that's the stage where the dry seed to first leaf emerge. Then the next column would be the 12 days. It has already 2 leaves emerge. Then the next one would be on the 21-day period. It's a tillering, 1 main stem plus 1 tiller. As you read all the column, reaching to the 45 days, it's already the booting. The ear swollen in stem, just under the flag or leaf. Then from another one, from 70 to 79 days, down below is the clear liquid milk stages, or early, mid, late. Then the next one is from 81 to 89 days, the dough stage, early, which is early, soft, hard. So it's from 79 to 81 days, that's the day that we need to consider. No? So in summary, therefore, the biblical year starts with the month of the Abib, or the ripening of barley, being prepared for the wave shift, which cannot begin unless the barley has reached a stage where it will be harvest ready 2 to 3 weeks later. So that would be my presentation. And it ends there.
Wonderful, Benedict. Wonderful. Thank you very much for giving this to us, and may you be abundantly blessed. This is great. What we normally do now is have an opportunity for people to ask questions, and we have a discussion. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, sure. I'm okay.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we will look forward to people sticking up their virtual hands in Zoom, and we'll look to see if people start wanting to ask questions. I'll just make a comment here if I can. This is wonderful, Benedict, and we pray that you will be abundantly blessed and encouraged and strengthened as you teach to various different individuals. This is wonderful. We have a hand up for Ella. Ella.
Can he put back up the Zadok chart? And it went, what, 99 to, was it 102 or 70, 91 to 99 days? Is that always accurate?
That would be the reference using these charts. So most likely, this been tested. So I could say at least about 90%, in my opinion, accurate. But again, we need to consider this 79 to 81 days. That's the key dates, the day where we need to consider to the barley. So in preparation for the start of the biblical, to declare the new year.
Just, counting, December is 31 days, January 31, that's 62. And if we go through 22 or 28 days in February, that's what, 90 days. So if I think Becca, I don't know who else, but Becca had seen some growth in December, but I know they've had lots of rain, and that slowed down in cold and rain. But I'm just wondering, to me, looking at this, and we're past the 79 to 81 days, we're getting close to the 99 days, and
Yeah, which is
just want, if the Father, and it's going to be in His timing, but just looking at this in the natural, we're pretty close, because I know she saw some things in December. So at the end of February, we're going to be past 90 days. So if it warms up and dries everything out and it grows, I don't know.
The last video Becca did, very recent, I think a day ago, yesterday, as she mentioned in the video, there's no new new to be declared, so she's
Right.
not considering any
Right.
info.
Right.
So,
But I'm just saying, as you look at the calendar and look at the days that we have, we appear to be very close.
yeah,
Um,
yes,
So it'd be interesting to see what the Father's going to do in the land in the next few days. Is he going to dry it out,
true, yeah,
prune
that's all.
everything up? But I noticed, watched one this morning, and she was saying that the fields that she had seen last year, they'd plowed them and planted in one field, and in another field it wasn't acceptable because it wasn't a whole field or whatever.
Yep.
So it's going to be interesting to see how it develops.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you for the question.
So the neat thing about that question, or at least how I'm interpreting it, is basically whether or not Jehovah will stretch or shrink parts of these growing cycles, right? And I see Glenn has his hand up, and I'm wondering if he'd like to comment on that.
Actually, I do. In my experience, most plants have a set lifespan. And within a few days of these, for instance, in the barley, it's going to do what it's going to do. It doesn't matter if it's stunted. It doesn't matter if there's enough fertilizer, whatever. If it germinates, from the time it's germinated to the end of its cycle, it's going to flower. It's going to do its thing. Even if there's just one barley on it, I'm just giving you an example, a little exaggerated, but it will do what it's going to do within that allotted period of time. Like a human being gives birth and is within so many days of their allotted time. That's the same thing with the barley or any plant for that matter. And what Becca was mentioned this morning was that the barley she had seen in those fields from last year and the year before, if those fields had not been disrupted with rocks and with being tilled, she says there would be some ready, but it's not enough because it has to be a certain amount and a field of it. So she says she doesn't see that anywhere else yet. She's going to keep looking. She hasn't found anything that actually shows any barley at this point. So that's going to take a little bit of time if you look at the chart. So, who knows? Jehovah is a God of drama, and he might just pop this thing out somewhere. She might just find it, and it could change everything. But right this minute, Becca's not really confident that we're going to see something real soon. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. So we have hands up from Paul and Eric has his mic off. Paul has his mic, sorry. And Paul, okay, Paul, do you want to speak on this or something different?
No, this is good because it is also, when you do a count roughly to Passover from where we are now, if it is in the next month. We've got about 9 days before we check the beginning of the month, and there's 15 days we need to tag on, or could be 17 days because the actual wave offering takes place on the Sunday during Passover. So it could be towards the end of the week. So it could be up to 30 days away yet. Just have to watch. This is where Joe and a lot of other people is to judge a matter. We're learning to judge a matter. We get people to give us witnesses and examples of how to look at things, and therefore we have to make up our choice ourselves. Having pictures from Becca is great, and her understanding is awesome, but that's one aspect. We listen for others as well. We have to have two witnesses. Now, the two witnesses are the barley and the moon, as we all know. And if there's in 30 days we get some, or 24 days, I think is the minimum, to maximum of up to 30 days, Jehovah is going to test us. Are we, the object here is, are we ready to be tested? He's going to test us and keep testing us all the way to the end. And this is a year that's going to test us greatly because he wants us to be better and better at the watching and learning.
Yeah.
And I think that the brother here has done very, very greatly at giving us a guideline on that. So thank you.
Thank you as well, Mr. Paul.
Thank you. Eric.
Yeah, I was just curious. The first Passover was outside of the land. So when God determined the time of the Passover, was it determined just by him, or was God using the barley in the Egyptian area at all? Now this is you were teaching on basically what it should be like when we're in the land, and the other
Yes.
question is how much do we know how much from the scriptures has to be in the Aviv stage before we declare that month the month of Aviv? In all your research, did you find a minimal amount of that which is in that stage?
From what I know, from what I understand, so the 10 spies made a the Israel made a visit to the land of Israel, no, to check the land. So most likely they considered that area not to the side of Egypt area, but in the land of Israel itself. Did I answer your question?
Well, basically, I'm just trying to figure out, do you find in all your research that you did with the stage of Aviv, or the barley, and how it goes through these different stages, did you find anywhere in the scriptures where it talks about the minimal amount that you need? Because that was
it's Omer, right? So
but do you find that scripturally is what I'm asking? Do you find that anywhere in the scriptures that the bare minimum is supposed to be? And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I'm just trying to figure out, is there a scriptural reference where it has to be a minimum of an omer? And to me, the ripening of the barley would be like saints in their walk, like the first fruits. There were other saints that were in the grounds, but there were only certain ones that were resurrected when Yeshua was resurrected. So even though there were other people that could have been resurrected, Yeshua was bringing up a certain portion of the first fruits to show that not only was he resurrected on first fruits, but anyone who had believed in him was resurrected with him, which does my heart good. It wasn't just Yeshua, which kind of would be depressing to a lot of people, because he was worthy of being resurrected, but also those that had fallen asleep before he had come, or possibly while he was there, they were resurrected with him. So it basically states that if the first fruits are good, then we know that the harvest and the end of the age is also going to be good. So we'll be worthy of resurrection like Yeshua was, only because we take on his righteousness. It's imputed to us. So I was just curious about the minimum, and I can't find anywhere in the scriptures. I didn't know if you found that in the scriptures in your research.
If you actually look up Leviticus 23:10-11 as it's on the screen, and you look up, I believe if you look it up in Hebrew in Esword, it delineates what the wave sheaf or the sheaf is referred to as omer.
Is an omer. Okay. So
Yeah,
that would insinuate that it has to be a minimum of an omer.
Yeah, and we can look it up here. Don't take my word for it. Check it out.
No. I just want to make sure that the scriptures are pointing to that minimum, because I know, and the other question is, all throughout Israel, some of the crops will ripen sooner than others, depending on where it is on a hill, or where it is with shade or sun, or where it is in the country itself, the north or south, east or west, depending on where it is. They're not all necessarily going to ripen at the same time. So depending on where it is in Israel, some will ripen faster than others.
Jane actually found it in the chat. If anyone is interested, it does equate to omer.
Okay.
Yeah, from Leviticus 23:10, the sheep. So H6016, sheep means omer. Omer. So properly a heap, that is a sheaf. Also an omer, a dry measure, omer, sheaf. So that's
so how do we equate that today? What is the size of an omer today?
That's why
we looked it up last year, and the size of an omer is undefined. The size of an omer can be 16 cups. It can be 4 cups. It can be a handful, and it can be as many grains are on the stalk of at the head of a stalk. It's an
So-
it's an undetermined amount.
So he's leaving that to our discretion. Is that what he's doing?
Yes. And I also have another answer to your question about when the children of Israel were in Egypt, how did they know that it was the first month?
Right.
So Exodus 12 says, and this shall be the first month for you. In other words, God said,
God
this
said,
is the
yeah.
first month.
In other words, he declared it. So I'm wondering
Declared it.
if we look at the pattern that God has set up at the very first Passover, and God declared that this is the month. Do we see that repeating itself when the two witnesses show up and they come down and they're giving witness to what God is saying? Is that going to be the year that those two witnesses say, this is the beginning of the months? Is he going to give us, will those two witnesses basically reset God's calendar to the proper timing? That's what I'm wondering, because basically on the first Passover, God declared it through his word directly to his people. So there was no doubt about the source of where it came from. Will God, with those two witnesses in the future, say, this is the particular Shmita year, this is the particular year, month, day of his calendar, and at that point he is basically reset, and everyone needs to take notice of this being declared by these two witnesses in, I guess, Jerusalem, that here's the calendar, you guys have messed it up, I'm going to straighten you out here. Here's the actual Hebrew calendar, use this. And I'm wondering if he's going to do that again through those two witnesses. Just curious.
Don't you think that they were already keeping his calendar and he was just declaring, because wasn't it agricultural before, like in the fall was the first year that they were doing? And wasn't he saying, now this is the first month for you to start the new year? So they were watching for the moon, I would think. They were watching for the barley. I think they had done that all the time. But he was declaring what's the beginning of the new year.
He had never had a Passover before, ever, until that first year in Egypt. Passover had never occurred.
Actually, it occurred with Abraham and Lot.
Yeah, but you'll notice he didn't call it that, though.
No, but it is the reference to the meal.
Right, right. I don't disagree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing too is that someone stated that you need to have enough to make unleavened cakes.
Yes.
So someone put in 2.3 liters, about a quart is an omer of a standard amount to make so many cakes. And you have also enough in the wave offering to still have barley on stalks. I don't know whether the whole lot was the stalks were waved, or the cakes were waved, or maybe all three items: the unleavened cakes, the flour with oil and incense in it, and then also the stalks were waved. I don't know whether they involved all three parts. It is something to look at there. But it is to judge the matter. In Egypt, when they did the first beginning of month, I believe the barley and the flax were destroyed by hail because they were ripe. They were getting to onto the brittle side of being ready to harvest, and that is why God called it, because it was ready to harvest, and that's why He called the beginning of the month. And yet, when something's brittle and it gets broken, it's been prepared by God. And yet we have to whip the barley at Passover to denote that Jesus was whipped. We have to understand that He was the barley and part of the lamb and part of everything. It's all connected to understanding His feast days. It takes the understanding from God to put in our head that everything that He put in place was for a purpose, and we don't see all of that purpose yet. We only see just the tip of the iceberg of what we're just discussing at the moment. It's just a little pinprick of what He has for us when we get to heaven to study it more. And it's awesome. It is absolutely awesome. There's so much in the preparation of Passover, and then and what's still to come. Like we're going to see Jesus come back at trumpets or at atonement and lock the devil away. But then there's the feast, the end feast, the of Sukkot. That's still to come after everything's finalized. God's still playing out Sukkot. Will we go to the city? Will we worship God with Sukkot between the devil getting locked away and the new millennial age? That is what he's going to prepare us for, to do Sukkot, to do the last fruit offering, to prepare for the end of the age. We have to learn to do that one as well. That's going to be a critical one. It's the 8th-day feast and everything else. It is such a detailed understanding from God that I'm just, as someone says, and Joe says often, gobsmacked.
So,
Thank you,
may I
Paul.
interrupt?
Yes, Ben, do you want to respond, or you're okay?
I have
with
nothing to
Glenn?
add. I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn.
So I'm kind of not sure if Eric was asking this question. Are you saying could there be possibly 2 witnesses that will come and determine the exact timing of the Passover? Is that the question?
Oh, no, the first question was basically, how do we know how much in the wave sheaf offering and the omer? What is the bare minimum that we need in order to declare that particular month, the month of Aviv? Which pretty much they answered that. But if you'll notice too, with the first one, I'm just saying, if we look at the first one, God basically through his word declared it to be the first month. He says, this is Aviv. I'm wondering if that pattern is true, because I mean, every year, everyone is doing it, not on the same, sometimes not on the same day, definitely not on the same month. If you start it early or late, the entire year, all the rest of those feasts are off. They're all off. But I'm wondering how God is going to get the people that are striving to do it correctly. How is he going to get it to where we're all synced up doing it correctly? Not because we think we're right and everyone else is wrong, but where God comes down and his word says, if you want to join me, if you want to do it right, this is the way to do it.
He is going to do that. And I think if you, and I can't, give you 100%, but the 2 witnesses are going to die in the second Passover. The first Passover, or the early Passover, they're going to go in the wilderness. They're going to escape. The second Passover, I don't want to say the second because it gets confused with the.
Talk about the second month.
A month later.
Yeah.
A month later.
Yes, exactly. A month later,
Right.
they're going to get caught up in, the dragon coming after them, and they're going to die. So right there, that will correct everybody, because at that point, we're all going to know the correct timing was the first timing. I believe this doesn't say it in the word, but if you extrapolate from it, that's what I see. And I think Joe said the same thing in the past. So yes, there'll be a correction, but it isn't going to be Jehovah saying this is what it is, or the 2 witnesses saying this is what it is, because they're actually going to perish in that later Passover. Thank you.
We will also have drought and famine and no rain. So we'll be all messed up in the cycles, won't we? We'll know when we may not even see moon during a period of darkness, right? So it's very interesting to look into that. Yeah. Any other questions for Ben? Comments or an encouragement?
Yes, I have to give him encouragement because he's bilingual, obviously. And I think he did a fabulous job. There weren't any words that I couldn't understand. He did a great job. He got to the meat of it. He explained it well. He knew what he was talking about. Excellent job. I wish I could do that.
Thank
Put
you.
together a presentation like that. Thank you.
Yes,
I
thank
have
you,
to-
Ben.
Yeah, I have to second that. You did a great job. Great job,
Yeah.
Ben.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Very
That's
good.
very good. So we thank you very much, all of us. We thank you for being with us. And of course, you're welcome to stay, but we do know it's very, very late where you are, right, Ben?
Yeah, yes.
So I
I'm
think
gonna sleep now.
very good. Very
Thank
good.
you again.
And
Thanks for having me.
thank you
Yes,
very much.
appreciate you
Ben.
coming on.
Excellent.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
So Shane, you can introduce the next speakers.
Well, no one knows these guys. So we have Sombra and Glenn, and they're going to be talking about Shmita and other things. It's going to be a interview type process, and it should go on for a while, so it should be really interesting.
Yeah, so we are going to do this interview style. I'm going to interview Glenn, but we are also going to entertain questions and not just questions, but input from everybody else, because that's how we do it here at Sighted Moon. Okay, so so let's begin with the scripture verses regarding the sabbatical year. Leviticus 25, verse 1 to 7. Shane, do you have that handy? The eSwords handy? I could just read it otherwise.
Well, it's going to help to bring it up, because there are
Right.
going to be words that we need to look up in the Hebrew just to get clarification.
What's the verse again? Sorry.
It is Leviticus 25, verses 1 to 7.
Okay. Oop. Hold on. What happened?
Take
There
your time. No rush.
There we go.
I can read you my intro. My intro says, welcome to our interview format for today's sermonette. Today we have Glenn Caron, who has kept the sabbatical year in 2016, and he will answer questions for us on how he managed to keep this commandment. Okay. There we go. Okay. Jehovah spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, maybe I should read it from your verse. Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, and then shall the land keep a Sabbath to Jehovah. You shall sow your field 6 years, and you shall prune your vineyard 6 years, and gather in the fruit of it. But the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest to the land, a Sabbath for Jehovah. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard. You shall not reap that which grows of its own accord. You shall reap not that which grows of its own accord of your harvest, neither gather the grapes of your undressed vine. It is a year of rest to the land. And the Sabbath of the land shall be food for you and for your servants, and for your slave woman, and for your hired servant, and for your stranger who stays with you, and your cattle, and for the beast that is in your land shall all the increase of it be for food. Okay, and then the next verses we're looking for is Leviticus 26, verse 34 and 35. Okay, then shall the land enjoy its Sabbath as long as it lies waste, and you are in the enemy's lands. Then shall the land rest and enjoy its Sabbath. As long as it lies waste, it shall rest, because it did not rest in your Sabbaths when you lived in it. And then verse 43, Leviticus 26, 43. Okay. And the land also shall be forsaken by them, and shall enjoy its Sabbaths while it lies waste without them. And they shall accept the punishment of their iniquities, because they despised my judgments, and because their souls hated my statutes. Okay. Now, before we begin this interview, we are not going to invest time into determining when this land Sabbath is. Rather, we will defer to all the teachings of Joseph Dumond for these proofs as to when it is, and we will just state that the sabbatical year will begin at this next Aviv moon as soon as the barley is found to be Aviv in the next 30 to 40 days, and then the sighting of the moon following the barley will be the determination of the new year. Now, let's get to our first questions. We are a month away from the sabbatical year. What should I be doing today to prepare for this coming year? Glenn.
Well,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yep.
So the first thing you do is you got to think about it. And, you know, it's like estimating. Anybody who does estimating, you kind of have to think about what you're doing, and you got to put things in order in your mind and in front of you if you need that help. And it's not that difficult. You just got to think about, okay, what do I eat in a week? Okay. Get into it. Think about it. I need so many boxes of the cereal, grains, you know, vegetables. What do I eat? Now you think about the things you can live without so that you don't have to overstock or stock and then not eat. But you know, fresh vegetables, that's a hard one. That's a hard one to try to go without for an entire year. So you got to start there. What are you going to do about that? Start journaling to help determine your usual habits and needs. Think long and hard about the products that grow from the land that you'll use at least once a year. You need to think about it. Think about the harvest period for these plant-based products. When do they come into ripeness? I guess some of the youngest, the stuff that will go quickly is going to be the greens, you know, the leafy greens. And you really, like lettuce, you can't say, I'll store it. You're going to throw it in the freezer and it comes out, it's all mush. You know, it's not going to be the same as eating a salad. This is not going to work. So you go through each item that's in your list that you need to eat that is based on plants. Plants is the key. Does it come from the ground? Does it grow from the ground? Okay, lettuce, Swiss chard, all those are, cabbage, all those leaf type things are probably the one thing that's going to go quickly. Then you got to start thinking about the other things, like potatoes. Potatoes last a long time. You also want to think about the long-term storage of these things. Like potatoes, you can hold for 6 months. Onions, you can hold for 6 months, a year maybe, if you're lucky. I've had a squash, literally a butternut squash, last me almost a year and a half in proper storage. So I'm not a fan of squash necessarily, but I certainly could live on it if I have to. But you got to start thinking of that, and you got to back up the timetable. And so if we end up not, in a couple of weeks here, but the later one, so we have time now to start thinking about what we need, put your journal together, start figuring out what you got to do, what you need to live on. Can we live on canned food? Sure. But you know what? If you're a vegetarian, it's going to be a big difference to go from fresh vegetables to canned or frozen. And you need to determine if you can live with that or not. I have other things I want to discuss with you about the fresh vegetable side of things, but I think we'll get through that with the other questions that are coming. Some of the things you have to think about, and again, we can go through some of these other, they'll come up with the other questions we have here that were presented on the Facebook Sabbatical Cycle site.
So,
but let me just check a few things else here. I have some notes. Bread's important. That's like, you can't live on just bread, but bread's very important because you get a lot of your carbs from it. You got to look at the cycle of whatever bread it is, if it's barley bread, if it's wheat bread, when does the harvest season come for your area? Because it may be different in other parts of the world. So it's going to be opposite in the South. So, you know, you have to think about what it is in your area. In my area, I mean, there's not a lot of grains here, but in the Midwest, there's grains, and you can look this stuff up. You Google it. When is grains? You can call your grocery store and ask. You can call the manufacturers of your wheat product that you're buying, and find these things out. Find out when the harvest starts for them to start processing the bread. If you know that, you can back up, and so you don't have to necessarily buy this all by the beginning of Aviv. For instance, you shouldn't with bread, because you're going to have Passover 2 weeks later. You buy all your bread, now you got to throw it out and start over. So don't do that. Whatever you do, don't buy the bread right away. You can buy the grain, you can store the grain, you can store the flour, you can do that, but don't go buy a whole bunch of loaves of bread, throw it in the freezer, and then you're going to throw it out 2 weeks later when Passover comes. You can wait almost months before you need to buy the bread. But you need to check out your dating, and you need to check out the source of this. And you can do that. It just takes a little Google research to do it. I don't have an example, but I've done it before, and it's easy enough to do. So I guess that's my answer for most of this, is you're going to have varying things you can do. Another example, you know, and we'll go into more detail too with it. Paper, you know, toilet paper. We heard toilet paper. Toilet paper is a paper product. It is farmed from trees or from hemp or whatever that product is. So if you're buying wood-based toilet paper, when is it harvested? When is that cycle? You could probably get away with almost 6 to 8 months a year before that comes to the market. So you need to think about these things. I hope that helps answer some of it. We'll get in more detail with the rest as we go.
Well, one of the things you said is, you know, getting used to eating in a different way. If you're used to eating fresh fruits and vegetables, you know, is your food world large enough that you could just do smoothies? Because we can get powdered vegetables, right? We eat a lot of frozen spinach. That's my alternative. Another thing is, last summer I dried a bunch of nettles, so I can use dried nettles, but I can use also the fresh nettles when the nettles grow.
Yep. Yeah, that's another thing. You can get this from the land that you live on too. Foraging, you can get you know, if you're used to spinach, you don't have spinach, you know, you've got dandelions, you've got a bunch of other leaf crops, you can buy pokeweed, so on and so on. But you need your responsibility, so that you're trying as hard as you can, because that's where it's going to come from. Jehovah's going to see the effort. If you don't put the effort in and say, oh, I can't do this, and then you just do whatever, garden anyways. Now, you know, what you're doing is you're violating the one thing that all of those scriptures says. It says land rest. Okay, so the number one thing you can do is follow that. What is it about? It's about the land. All right, you garden. All right, first thing you're gonna do is you're not gonna have a garden in 23. You're just not going to do a garden in the ground in 23. So you've just taken care of no planting, which it actually says no sowing, and sowing is very specific to seeds. Okay, so we'll get into that some more later too, because there's a conflicting scripture that says when you come into the land and will have planted all types of fruit trees, etc. That kind of contradicts what it's saying. But we're not planting seeds. We're not planting seeds in the ground. Even you can't cheat. You can say, oh, I'll put them in peat pots and then I'll plant them in the ground. You're still planting a seed plant into the ground, and the ground is not resting. So you need to think about these things and put them in context. And that's why, if we want, we can look up some of these words, the word sow, the word harvest, the word prune. Those are important things to look up, and look up in the original words. And sow actually has the connotation of planting seeds. In fact, I think if you look up the paleo, it actually has a noon, which is a seed sprouting. And I don't have that information here, but we can do it on here if we have time, if we want to look into it.
What word is
So
that?
keep that in
Just write
mind.
that down for now. What's the word that you said has the noon in it?
I believe it's sow. If you break that one down, because a lot of people, like some of the versions will say, do not plant. Well, yes, in essence, you're planting seeds, so do not plant. Well, what if you're planting trees in pots? Does that cover that? Well, that's something we can get into a little bit later.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
Yeah, there's so much here. It goes into all kinds of rabbit trails.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so question number 2. Steve, I'll ask. We'll get to some questions a little bit later. We just want to get a little bit rolling for the moment. Okay, question number 2 is, how does someone prepare when they travel a lot?
And that's a tough one. But the same thing applies as the first question. You got to think on your days and your needs while you're traveling. You have to think about it. What you got to plan ahead. You can't just say, I'm going to take off now. Oh, I forgot about the sabbatical year, and then start eating off the land and so on. You can't do that. You can can you prepare your own stuff so you don't buy it? You know, this kind of leads into that rabbit trail. Buying. Can you buy the vegetables? Well, if you're not, the first thing is it's a land rest. If you're controlling land that you usually garden in, and now you're not because you're trying to keep it, you're resting the land, 90% of it is taken care of in that. Do not plant your gardens in the ground. I'm going to keep being very specific. So
would
yep.
you say, for somebody who's never kept it before and they're just trying to obey the first commandment, the first layer of it is basically just don't put anything in the ground. Don't plant any fruits or vegetables in your ground. That's the first layer. The next layer is preparing so that you have food, so that you're not buying in the market.
Yes. Now, the question that comes up there, rabbit trail, is it a prohibition to buy the food you need? Like, first of all, you need to try to keep it, okay? Don't plant in the ground. You're keeping 90% of it if you're not planting in the ground you control. Now, if you're going to buy it, and this is Glenn's opinion, and you need it for your sustenance, I'm not saying go and buy like you did before, but if occasionally you need to get it, or it's intermixed with your restaurant purchases, you know, are you violating? Who's violating it? Who's violating this command? Is it you by buying it? Well, you're kind of encouraging them to continue their bad practice of planting if you're buying it, because you're giving them money to continue their profiting. But you didn't actually do the sinning. They did, because they planted for that year. You got to think about that. Now, that's going to be something each one of you are going to have to determine yourselves. I can't do that. I personally think there are going to be situations where you go, I have to buy. I have no other choice. That's the what I call the ox in the ditch, just like on Sabbath. If you have an ox in the ditch, you're not sinning. Because remember, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. That still applies for this land rest.
Right.
He didn't sit there and say, don't eat. You can't eat. He's not. Life is important. Right. Some people have to have vegetables. They can't eat anything else. Or potatoes or whatever. I know somebody, all they could eat was potatoes. That's it. Well, and fresh potatoes, or they had terrible reactions if they did anything else. So I can see there's an issue. So each one of you are going to have to determine that.
And
so
that's what our Messiah is for. For when we sin, we can repent and he will forgive us. you
But
know?
your effort is most important. Don't just blow it off, say, oh, they're all oxes in the ditch. I got to do it. And it doesn't matter, because now you're actually turning your face away from him.
Right.
And you can't do that.
So in answer to this question about someone who, how do they prepare when they travel a lot? I met a woman last year who had severe celiac disease, and she always had to bring her own food with her everywhere she went. So she had prepared things like small cans of meat, you know, whether it was her own chicken or whether she was buying the meat, small cans of vegetables in single serving sizes. She also purchased all the equipment, things like thermoses and the take along packs and, you know, those sorts of things to help her preserve her food until she could get it, so that she always had a healthy picnic meal for her wherever she went, because of course with her she can't have any contamination of wheat. Okay, so let's take a couple of questions. Can we answer Nancy's? Before we do that, sorry, Nancy, you'll be next, but I just wanted to go back to what Anita said here. Anita asked the question, so can I cut for my family members and they cut for me? And I think that's along the lines of, when you go to the restaurant, you're not responsible for whether or not your family members planted this year. But according to the rules of the sabbatical, you can go into each other's fields and take to feed yourself what grows from the ground.
Of itself, yes. Yeah, it's not something somebody else planted, but it is what's already there. You can go in their yard. They have fruit trees, peaches, whatever. Technically, in the sabbatical year, you can go to of course, if they let you, you don't want to get shot, go and eat their fruit, and vice versa. I'm going to be, in my case, I have 40 or 50 fruit trees. I got a couple of hundred blueberry shrubs. I got raspberries. I've got too much. There's just no way that our little family is going to eat all that. This is for my other, my extended family and for potentially sales. But I'm going to actually open up the nursery. I'm going to have a sign, to come and get some of these products. But I'm not going to allow them to get a bushel of blueberries. I'm going to say, here's your bag, or no, we can't take more than a little sandwich bag full, whatever. I have to limit it, because you know how they're going to come in and just take everything. So that's how I'm going to allow it. And if they don't, I'm going to take what I need for my family for the day or the week, not necessarily the day. Leave it on the shelf. As I need it, I'll eat it. I'm not going to run out every time I need something out to the tree and get it. I'm going to take a armful, come on in, and eat it as I go. Now, if I don't get it all, I leave it on the tree. Let it fall. Let the animals get it. Let the insects get it. Let the bugs, the wild animals, everything get it. That's what it's for.
Right.
Yeah.
Nancy? Sorry, do you have that question?
Okay, well, I'm struggling. How do you feel? I don't see how at all that we could collect up a whole year's worth of animal feed. Now they're on a sweet grain, a pellet, and then the chickens are on their food. And I mean, we have a back house, but we can't afford to buy a year's supply of food.
Well, what kind of animal are you talking about?
Well, there's sheep and goats, during the winter you have to, but we supplement grain at night and in the morning. But it's sheep, goats. I have a horse and I have a cow, and then we have ducks, chickens, one guinea, and we have turkeys as well. So not many turkeys.
I can give you information for myself regarding turkeys, chickens, ducks. That I did store up grain for that. A portion of it went moldy because it got wet.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be feeding the moldy food. That's not good.
Right.
They can actually get sick.
But
you can use storage like old freezers, and then throw a bag, and you can have them outside. Throw a plastic rubber bag on it, or or something impermeable that'll help keep the moisture up.
Yeah.
That's one thing, but I understand what you mean. I ended up buying 1.5 tons of chicken feed. I really didn't need to do that. That's why when it got moldy, it wasn't a big deal because I free ranged them. So during the season, or even as soon as the snow melts, I open the cages up and let them go. Let them do their thing. They go, they eat, they come back in. So those are all for fowl, okay? But my son has had sheep and goats. Actually, he's got sheep now. He had goats. He's got those round marshmallow bales that he bought, a certain amount of them, and they'll last a long time. Protected. Don't put them in the sun, put them in the shade. Don't open them until you have to. Those will last a long time. They'll at least get you through the winter. Because then after that,
You're talking about hay?
Yeah, hay or whatever the animal needs, alfalfa, etc.
We get fescue, 2 round bales, probably every 3 to 4 weeks right now. Non-graze unsprayed, which some people just can't get their hands on now. But it gets delivered, at least once a month to us. There's not any location I could store it that much. So that's another issue. And this is fescue that's growing naturally. It's not planted. So, we are trying to fence in the other pasture that'll cut down on their hay eating. It'll cut down a lot of things. And I can't free range. We tried that. And we have too many chicken hogs. And so the area that they kind of free range in is netted above them. So we really had to sort of.
I would say just do the best you can.
Yeah.
Do the best you can. And you know what? Once you start doing the best you can, something's going to happen. I can tell you miracles that have happened with us. And I'll give you one later when we've done most of this discussion to show you how it can be.
Yeah, we've been storing canned foods, for vegetables and fruit for a little while now. And that's my intention is we have some things that I think will reseed itself and pop up during the spring. I didn't tear out any of the Torah for anything. I just wanted it to naturally just die out into the, and whatever comes up, thankfully,
So I think the answer to your question, Nancy, is you do what you can.
Yeah.
And we have the saying, you do what you can and you can what you can't. You do what you can and you tell Jehovah Father, I'm sorry, I can't, the rest, forgive me. And that's all we can do.
And just try, and just remember some of the things I said about buying.
Yeah.
You didn't sin if you're buying it. You didn't do the sinning because it says plant, prune, harvest. It actually says sow, prune, harvest.
Okay, so
harvest
we're going to Steve now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
What I found out is, I think about what Glenn said, because I had this conversation before with Glenn about, planting not in the ground. And I said, I know the previous time I said about, I've got a lot of stuff growing in sort of pots and long tanks and that, right, which I planted, fairly early on in the year, January, February, March, sort of January sort of time, December, January. And that's growing out now. Now, I don't know what the others think. Mainly, I'm talk to Glenn again about the fact that I'm going to have crop growing like spinach, right? And I can grow that spinach all year round and get leaves off it, right? Now, am I contravening the land Sabbath or not when I'm doing it? And it's basically
Paul here. I don't think you are, because you've already planted it in the pots before the year started, and you're not harvesting the whole lot. You're just eating it as you go.
Well, did he say he's putting them in the ground?
No, I'm not putting it in the ground. I mean, we had that conversation before where we made sure we didn't put anything in the ground. So we put stuff in. I've got stuff growing up. It's like cropping now, right? Little leaves, right? Now I can live those leaves for a whole year, right? Because it's not in the ground, it's in containers. And I'm just saying, am I contravening the Torah by doing that or not?
Well, Steve, it's like this. When you plant something in a pot, did you plant it before the year started?
Yeah, well, I've planted it.
Right. So because you planted it, right? No, not yet, but you've got it planted, right?
It's already planted. That's what I'm saying.
That's right. So now all you do is you leave it alone. You take what grows of itself and you eat that. And if there's too much of it and you don't want the plant to die because it's just overgrown, you cut some off and you give it to those who need it. This is what is going through the whole process.
Yeah, that's what I figured out, right? But I just wanted to check with other people because I know that Glenn does something like that, don't you?
Yeah.
Let's just clear something about harvest, because there's a definition that we need to look at here. So I think this is a good point to start here. The word harvest means to gather for sale or for storage. Okay. Again, so let's do the potatoes. All right. Usually you have a bunch of potatoes, you dig them all up, you gather them up, you throw them in a box, you throw them in your basement for 6 months. That's harvesting. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you've got potatoes in the sabbatical year and you need some, you go out there, you pull out of each plant what you need for the next 2 or 3 meals. That's it. You go back and get some more in 3 days when you run out, or you don't touch it for a week or 2, whatever. It'll sit there and do nothing, or maybe the rodents will get it or whatever. But that's what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to harvest for sale or gathering for storage. That's harvest. That's why it says reap of what it grows of itself. Okay. But it's not saying harvest. It's saying reap, meaning take what comes of itself as you need it, not as a storage,
that makes
hoarding or storage way.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I just wanted to sort of like amplify what you've said before, just to check out, right? Because, I'm wary about things, but that's good, right? And of course, any excess crop you can give to, the friends and neighbors. Yeah,
but don't pick it. Let them come pick it. Okay. I mean, if you want to give them a few, that's fine. But what I'm saying is if you've got, an acre of whatever, that's way too much. You don't need all that. And you're not going to go harvest it or gather it and then start giving it away. Bring it all to the food bank. I mean, that is still harvesting, They can come and get it as they need it. And that's what it's all about. Now, let me just clarify something else with the either hydroponics or growing in pots.
Okay.
Again, Glenn's opinion, not scripture. I believe you can do that if you're not connecting it back to the land. Okay, you've got a window box. You've always done window boxes. You grow your tomatoes in a window box and your lettuce and your herbs in a window box. You can still do that. Now, if you've got 1,000 window boxes and you're harvesting, that's a different story. You're doing something that's prohibited in essence, not in letter, okay? Because there's a letter of the law and there's the spirit of it, okay? I believe
so that would apply
to
that would seem to apply to bean sprouts, wouldn't it, as well?
Yes, exactly.
It applies to everything.
Yes, anything that's plants.
Yeah, it's not crop specific. It applies to everything. And Kurt made a comment. He says, remember, Jehovah's ways are more simple than they are complicated. And if you're struggling, this is where you need to go to prayer. And, it's good to have this conversation. I'm not at all trying to calm the conversation because I'm leading the interview. But what I'm trying to say is when we have these kinds of questions, this is where you take it to prayer. This is where you're asking the Father, and also you're taking the time to repent if you've made a mistake, because we all make mistakes. The point of Jehovah showing us what is and isn't sin isn't that he wants to smite us when we sin. The point is he's trying to direct our path so that we're loving him and worshiping him and walking his way. So it's okay. It's okay if you make a mistake. It's okay to repent of a sin. So
but it's good also to verify with the rest of the network what you're doing, right? Because it sort of amplifies more what you're doing. You're more sure about what you're doing. And, you've all answered the question. I kind of knew the answer, but I had to kind of like verify it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Okay, so we're going to move on now, Steve, okay? Paul Collier, can you ask us your question?
Well, actually, I was just going to answer the question that you just put there, which is, you just said we follow Jehovah's way.
Right.
Jehovah's way is not the broad way. Everybody travels on the broad way, and it leads to destruction. But narrow is the way that leads to eternal life, and not many find it. Those that travel that way will do the best they can.
Right.
On that way, the buying or selling of vegetables during the year is to be, I think even the scriptures, I think it was in Nehemiah, he told the people not to come to the city gates on the Sabbath and sell their wares on the Sabbath, and he was going to punish them for it. The question here is, they were obeying it in the city, but there was temptation outside. Are we going to follow the narrow way and obey as Nehemiah did, or are we going to go outside the city and get all our fresh produce and pay for it, which somebody else has spent that morning collecting, or the Friday night collecting and bringing it and selling it? This is where your heart is. Follow Jehovah's ways, and he is more than we can ever understand. He is just awesome in this.
Right.
So he's going to show you individually, all of us, what we need to do. With flour, if you freeze it for a week and sieve it and put it in sealed drums, it will last 12 to 18 months.
Longer than that, I've got some I've had for 10 years or more.
Well, there's your answer. So it's still good. So because you freeze it, you kill all the bugs, you put it in a sealed container, it'll last. Potatoes, from what I understand from Glenn, but you can store potatoes longer if you put them in a chilled environment, like between 2 and 5 degrees. It'll stop them growing, but it's got to be moisture not in the environment. So there's at least moisture in there. So there's no moisture allowed to be in the chiller, sort of thing, to stop them wanting to grow. The longer you can keep them. Pumpkins, keep in a dry environment, in a dark room, in a cool area. Any type of pumpkin. Some people don't like pumpkins. The same with potatoes. Potatoes, anything that grows in the ground can be kept cool. The leafy stuff can't. It's going to deteriorate. So we have to look at what stuff we can buy and store, and what Jehovah is going to supply that he knows that we just need. Now, there is another story that goes that the one prophet that was told by God to lie on his left side for so many days and on his right side for so many days couldn't go out and harvest, and it was a sabbatical year, and he had to prepare his food for the whole year and have it stored in his house so that either his servant could break it up and help him make the bread, but he had to do it. He couldn't move. He had to lie in that position, and he had to eat and do whatever his business was on the floor and clean it up, or down a hole. He had to lie on it. God looked after him.
Right.
Is your heart willing to follow him
Right.
on that narrow path? That's all I'm saying.
Right. Okay, let's move on to Eric. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
So in Leviticus 25:20, it says, and if you say, which is exactly what everyone's saying today, it says, if you say, what shall we eat in the seventh, since we shall not sow nor gather in our produce, then I will command, and this is where gets into the interpretation. It says, then I will command my blessing on you in the 6th year and bring forth produce enough for 3 years. So we're not necessarily talking about 3 years here, but we're talking about just 1 year. This would be a special time with the Yovel year following the Shmita. So this is a unique thing. But what I'm saying is, if you look at this, the question is today, how does God keep this command today? Because he was telling to the people back then. So could he keep everything that he gave them in the 6th year for rotting for 3 years? Absolutely. Could he keep everything that was stored away from any kind of rodents getting into it? Absolutely. So what I'm saying is, I believe we have technology today that God has given us, the ability to freeze food, freeze stuff that comes from the ground. If you buy stuff that's been frozen, that's been harvested already, and you have access to a freezer, to me, that technology comes from God.
Yeah,
That
but not
technology,
everybody has that technology.
no,
Remember?
I know, I know that, but what I'm trying to say is, look at what you have in, like, I forgot who it was that's talking about her animals. God is not wanting anyone to suffer in this year. He's not wanting the animals to suffer either. He's not wanting them, if you have alfalfa delivered, a special type of alfalfa delivered for your animals, you do the best you can. But if your animals need that alfalfa to thrive and survive, I believe you still are going to follow that pattern. But like Sombra said, go to God in prayer and ask him, okay, what technology that we have received from God, the blessing we have received from God, what technology can I use to try and get through this year and yet not have anyone in our household or any one of our animals suffer? He doesn't want any animals to suffer or lack the nutrients that they need. But this is where God says, I will give you produce 3 times the amount to handle for 3 years. So God must have done something very special. And this is unique because he's saying, I expect you to do this in the 7th year, but I will give you enough on the 6th year with the anticipation you're going to obey me for the 7th, 8th, and then the 9th one. So to me, I think this is something that everyone needs to come to grips with. It's not where you're going to all of a sudden not eat foods you're used to. It's how you store it up. If you have the technology, the ability to freeze these products, and then still be able to not cause the ground to work.
Right. And Eric brought up a very good point. God is a commandment keeping God. Deuteronomy 7 verse 9. He doesn't break his covenant with us. So if he told us to do this, he will keep his word to us. Our job is to do our best to keep our word to him. And we are human, and he knows we're human, and he knows we have weaknesses. Thank you, Eric. Rose.
Hi.
Oh, you're quiet. There you go.
Okay, sorry. Glenn, I wanted to ask you this question for a long time, because you mentioned one time that you had talked to a store owner that was giving you his overripe produce, and that you guys were eating from that. So I'm wondering what scriptural basis that if it's being thrown away, we can eat it. Like, I don't know where to find that. Does that make sense?
Well, that's something that each of you are going to have to determine, but I will give you my testimony that just happened recently.
Okay.
Back in 2016, I was blessed about 6 months before the sabbatical year with waste stream from the grocery store. I didn't buy it. I didn't do anything but grab it and give it to my chickens. And I did that for a while, and I realized, wow, I mean, they're throwing away good stuff, because what they do is they don't throw away, they throw away the damaged stuff, but they also throw away the older stuff. So
Right.
in a week cycle in the grocery store, they're throwing out the old, bringing in the new. They're not going to leave the old out and leave the new inside the warehouse till they're out of the old. No, they throw out the old, put the new in. So the old is still good.
Right.
So
Then you're frozen.
Glenn is gone. Yeah, so what he's saying is you're going to have to use your judgment on that. And I think that would be the same as your friend giving you something from their garden. It's something from what they have, they're giving to you. I don't think that means that we are supposed to be eating rotten food.
Right.
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking is because I'm part of a grocery co-op, sort of like a food bank. Pretty much everything that comes into it is discarded, leftover food that comes from grocery stores and private people that donate it. So I'm wondering if we take the produce, like I'm gonna feed it to my chickens like Glenn did, because I
Right.
don't think necessarily it applies to chickens. But I'm just wondering if it's okay for us to also partake of that produce as long as we take only as much as we need at that time.
I would think so. Well, yeah, I would think so.
Okay.
Because that's the blessing of the Lord, right? That's something the Lord has provided for you. You didn't plant it yourself.
I didn't grow it. I didn't pick it.
It's a blessing. It's been handed to you. So I would say the answer is yes.
All right, then I'm gonna go with that as,
Okay.
okay, thank you. That was my
We're
question.
waiting for Glenn to come back. Ella, you had a question?
Maybe a comment. I did the 2016 sabbatical, and I don't remember any heartache in that at all. I have great memories of the Father providing. I made my bread. You know, you didn't have to store up bread. You could make bread. You can eat the chickens. You can eat the fish. You can eat the meat. You know, you eat turkey and beef. So that's not a heartache. That's, you can survive with that. But I was blessed through a widow's tithe to be able to buy some like Patriot Supply, which are freeze-dried food, vegetables and fruit. And I actually still have some of that left because they were gallon cans and I couldn't eat all of that. And so this time I'm looking to buy smaller quantities in cans, you know, and not so much of frozen because what if your electric goes out, you know, but the cans will keep. So it was a pleasant time for me. But I want to say too, you know, I think you could probably go a 2-month period into the sabbatical year because that has been harvested and canned, and before it gets to the grocery, it may take 2 months. You can look and see when it was produced. But at the same time, at the end of the year, you're going to have the same scenario. You're going to have to wait 2 or 3 months before you could buy again what's being grown. And I think you've answered, because I always thought that you could eat what grew wildly in your stuff, but then I see something too that you're not to harvest there, maybe just harvest
I
it.
think that's the difference between the word harvest and
Right.
take to eat for yourself, right?
So I have some friends that grow a big garden, and occasionally they offer me some. So I'm safe to consume that, not to harvest it or to can it or provide just what I could eat in a day or a week. It's something I could take, and I would be okay with that. But
So
it's just
I would take from that verse that we read that even though my nettles grow wild, I'm not to harvest my nettles and sell them in the market.
right.
Right?
Right. But you know, the thing I kind of question and worry about too is, you know, if we go to the restaurant, and I don't remember this happening, I think I did pretty well. But if I wanted a big salad, could I buy a salad at the restaurant because I didn't harvest it? I didn't grow it. I didn't pick it.
I think I remember Joe saying anytime he had to go to a restaurant, all he ate was meat,
Yeah.
meat and dairy.
No, because somebody else harvested it.
Yeah. But see, I wonder about that
Yeah.
because then for them, you know, should we participate in that?
You can buy the wine that's harvested in the non-sabbatical year, so you don't have to store up wine, right?
Yeah.
Because the stores have done that for us in the right years.
Yeah. Right. There you go.
Somebody did ask the question, because you brought up bread, somebody asked the question about yeast. Of course, we have to get rid of our yeast for Passover. Can we buy yeast after Passover? And the answer to that is yes, because yeast is a byproduct of making beer from barley. So you can buy the yeast because it wasn't the barley that was just grown today. It was, so you can replenish your stock of yeast after Passover to make your bread for the whole sabbatical year. Eric?
Did everybody got knocked out or what?
No, just you, Glenn.
That's weird because I don't see anybody on here now. I just see 8 of you. I don't see 44 people. This
Well, that's
is weird.
really weird. And your camera's not on.
Oh, okay. Hang on. This
Eric.
is crazy.
Yeah, I was going to go to, I just want to point this out to people in case, some people are freaking out over these rules that they may have never heard before, but it says in Matthew 12:3, it says, but he said to them, have you not read what David did when he was hungry, and he and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and ate the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priest? Have you not read the law of the Sabbath, that on the Sabbath the priests of the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? Yet I say to you that in this place there is one greater than the temple. If he had known this, if he had known what this means, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is the Lord even of the Shabbat. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, if this is sometimes the person's first time to hear these things, which they've never heard their entire life, and you're going into a different level that you're walking with God, you change anything in this year, no matter how small it is, God will notice.
Right.
And to me, what I think it was Ella that brought it up, the canning of vegetables and fruits, that's a blessing from God. The ability to freeze vegetables and fruits, blessing from God. That technology is not ours. That technology was given to a man, and that man developed it. I remember I saw the program on how what was it, quick freeze technology came from a guy in, I think he was in Norway. The temperature up there was so cold, and he developed it. And I can tell you right now, he didn't develop through his own intelligence. He developed because God gave it to him. And from that came out bird's eye and a bunch of other technology that came from all that. So all the technology we have today to be able to do the things we do with running water, fresh water, canning, the freezing, all this technology we have, I can guarantee you 100% that was from God. And that's the way God has blessed us today. So in doing all this, don't make yourself feel so guilty that you don't do anything you normally do. Just take it a step at a time. There's no such thing in the scriptures as a leap of faith. That's not scriptural. Take a step of faith. Change something this year. If it's just one or two things, that's fine, but God will notice.
Yep.
You know, and so that's the step you want to take. In order to get close to God, you got to take it one step at a time. You don't take a leap. And so there are things, and don't beat yourself up just because you may not be able to do all these things, particularly if you have animals.
Yeah.
So this is not a make you feel guilty because you haven't been doing it in the past. It's take one step forward and change one or two things in this year and see how it goes and see what God does. If you draw close to him, he promises he'll draw close to you. So take a couple steps.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, when God takes a couple steps towards you, you're going to know it. So
yeah. So let me finish what I was saying. And I'll show you. He speaks to you. He's not going to speak to you here. He's going to speak to you in your mind. He's going to speak to you in what he does around you. And I consider it a miracle what happened in 2016. It fed 6 families, not just my own family. It fed 6 families, and some of them were mothers, single mothers with children, who I offered them to come and get all this free produce, and they loved it. They didn't know what to do without it. And they did that for a year or more. So anyways, I'm standing in the pharmacy line, and who's behind me? The produce manager at Hannaford. And I looked at him and I said, wow, perfect timing. I was wondering if I blah, blah, blah. He says, stand in line, hold my place. I'm going to go set it up right now. He came back. He says, I got 8 boxes for you ready to go when you're ready to leave. Bam, I'm set up. Twice a week, I go pick up produce. And I'm putting this stuff away as fast as I can. Am I going to continue during the sabbatical year? I am, because I'm not buying it. I'm not planting it. I'm not selling it. They are not getting any profits from it. If I don't take it, it's going in the trash. It's going in the compost pile. And believe me, whatever I don't use goes in the compost pile. So it's taking a little detour. It's going in here and coming out the other end for the compost pile. Okay. Am I violating? I don't think so. Not with all of that I've seen happen in such a timely manner. I'm blown away.
We have to take the whole word of God in context.
Correct.
When we are keeping this, we are also at the same time as keeping the sabbatical year commanded to be good stewards of what we have been given. You can't just disregard that just because it's the sabbatical year. If you've been blessed with something, use it.
Exactly. And that's how I looked at it. And I really, believe me, the first time it happened, I was eaten up. I didn't know what to do. I'm like, if he's given me a blessing and I turn it away, It's like that saying, the guy's in a lifeboat and the ship comes by and he says, no, I'm waiting for God to save me. And then finally a helicopter and so on. And then he dies and then he goes to heaven. He goes, gee, I thought I was waiting for you to save me. He says, I sent you 3 lifeboats and, you didn't take them.
Right.
It's the same thing. So he's going to respond to you. You're going to see it. If you're on the right path, the blessings will come. And that's up to you to recognize those opportunities and take them when they're there. So that's important to do. Now, another thing is, what do you do when you go to the restaurant and there's herbs on your steak? You're not going to eat your steak? I'm not going to eat the salad, but I'm going to eat the steak. Okay, what are you going to do? They marinated it in some sort of vegetable sauce. I don't know. Obviously, you want to plan ahead so that you're doing your own thing at home. But if you're on the road, I think that was one of the questions. You're on the road. What do? You scrape some of the extra off. I don't know. It's up to you and your predicament. Again, did you plant? Are you violating the land rules? No, you're not. You're not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's not minor on the minutia. Let's get to the heart of the matter, right?
Exactly.
So we're going to take Kurt as the last question, and then we're going to move on to some of the other questions that are on our planned event.
Shalom, Glenn.
Hi.
Thanks for doing this. It's informative. My question is this. You alluded to the proper storage of potatoes. What would that look like? Is there an ideal temperature? Is there an ideal humidity?
Yes. And I'll give you an example. I've recently gotten some potatoes, a bunch of them. I'm talking more than I can handle. And I was in a warm room. There was light coming in from the room. They started sprouting. They turned green. Obviously, you don't want to eat the green because the green part has a chemical that if you eat too much of it, you can get sick. It's not good for you. So you can peel them off and eat what's inside. But anyways, I like to eat the whole thing. My point is that was the wrong temperature. It was 70 degrees. The sun was on them. It was dry. So they shriveled up, but they started sprouting and turned green and so on. So I moved them. I moved them into my basement. It's about 50, 60 degrees, 50, 60 right now. It's cooler. There's a little more moisture there. There's no light. It's dark. They're doing better. That's what you do. Now you can look up all the storage requirements for every crop you can think of, what the optimal storage is. And you can look it up online. The internet is awesome for this information. Look up each thing and write it down and do what it says, and you'll extend your crops tremendously. Try that. Also, look at the cycles, the potato cycle, for instance. Here in the Northeast, the potato cycles on the earliest, the red bliss potatoes, it'll be like end of June at the earliest is the harvest. So whatever you see in your locally grown grocery store, if you have red bliss potatoes hanging around there, they're not from this year, but you got to check because they could be from the South. I don't know. Then they start their heavier harvest comes in September, and then you can store them all the way through April, okay, or more. Even if they sprout, they're still good, okay? Throw them in the compost pile. Maybe they'll sprout and you'll get something from those too if they do go bad. So that's potatoes. There is a whole bunch of other stuff you can figure out too.
Okay, so Steve, we're going to move on to the rest of the questions that are in our question and answer. Glenn, so you were just talking about some of these timings for when things grow. One of the questions we had was, how long can we eat fresh fruits grown presently until they are considered grown in the sabbatical year? And so in our preliminaries, you have a list of things. Do you want to go through that list of things?
Sure. Yep. Here in the Northeast, again, you guys have to check your areas out. I don't know where you're all at, but I know in the Northeast, I'm in New Hampshire, apple crop cycles typically at the earliest is August through November. So most apples around the world, they call them the winter time, they're called CA stored, or controlled atmosphere stored. And what they do is I'll just briefly go over it. They take them, they stick them in a room, they increase the CO2 levels and lower the oxygen, and they last 6 months or more in prime condition. So you don't have the ability to do that, but you can still buy them that last year's crop or this past year's crop, or before Aviv 1, you can buy as many as you want. You can even buy them all the way till August, and they'll still be CA stored. You need to check your local stuff. Yeah. The next one was onions.
Hold on a second. Susan, I'm going to turn off your, thank you. Okay, go ahead.
So onions, crop cycles here in the Northeast. Typically, you can get scallions and small onions in May. And then obviously right in the middle of August, you get your big crop up until maybe mid-September at the latest. Again, you can store them March, April, May. So when you go to the store, again, check to make sure they're not imported. But your onions you're buying in typically April, even May, are still last year's crop. Check it. You need to check it. Salad. Year-round hydroponics is okay. Okay, but you got to think about that. Again, this one here is my thoughts. It's hydroponic. It's not grown in the land. It's not grown in the ground. Can you eat salads in hydro? I believe you can. Again, don't be a hoarder. And, if you're doing your own hydro, don't get to the point where you're harvesting. And we went over those definitions. And it'll vary. And that can be April through October on the salads. Tomatoes, 3 weeks after Aviv, you're probably going to need to stop buying, because most of them are going to be coming in from the south, and they will have been grown in the sabbatical year. If you don't buy, I'm just saying, let's see, most soft fruits, unless hydro grown 3 weeks after Aviv, the latest, will vary by crop. Bread. Months, you can go months after Aviv, up to the new wheat or barley crop or grain crop, which may take up to 6 months or more to come back to the market. Check with your supplier, check your stuff. Paper products, we went over with the toilet paper. It could be up to a year, okay? Cotton, clothes is important. Cotton, linen, those are all grown in the ground. So that can be up to a year or more. Maple syrup, you can buy pre-2023 syrup, but check the labels, because as soon as the syrup season comes in, which will be probably at least another month, maybe a month and a half, then starts the new crop. But you can still buy the old crop. You just got to check your dating on the bottom. So it's about doing your homework and being aware. It's just like checking ingredients in the store. What's in it? There's no pork. There's no, fish. Shellfish, etc. You check it out. No GMOs. Now you got to check this stuff for the sabbatical year.
So this is one of those times we're thankful for the government that say you have to put your dates on your products, right?
Exactly. I wish they would do more. There's a lot of things I don't know, and it's not in plain sight.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Glenn, where was this information at again?
Online. Just look it up. Just look up, and you just write, local fruits, whatever it is, local apples, tomatoes. You can call the grocery store. They will bend over backwards to get you the information, because they know. The produce guy knows his stuff. The manager, their departments, they know when this stuff is, where it's coming from, when it's coming, and when it was grown. They know it, and they'll tell you.
Okay. So you kind of answered this question. One is, if the weather conditions are such that seeds can't be put into the ground prior to Aviv, but seeds have been planted into biodegradable peat pots, can I put those peat pots into the ground when the earth is warm enough after Aviv? The seed is already planted in soil and is already growing in the peat pot. I would merely be moving the peat pot with the seedling from a sheltered location into a small earth hole which receives sunlight and rain.
And again, with this one, I say no, because you're actually putting it in the ground, and now it's going to draw nutrients in from the ground. It's affecting the ground. It is not letting the ground rest or the land rest. You could just as easily take it and put it in a container on your deck in a 5-gallon pot or whatever the plant is, depending on its size requirements. But don't use the soil in the ground to put in the pot. And it says here, soil. Soil is the top 6 inches of the ground. Soilless mix is not related to the ground at all. It's a mined product. It's peat moss, perlite, vermiculite, and other products. And they are mined. They're not, it's not like you dig it out of the ground and throw it in a pot. It's soilless. It has no ability to hold nutrients. All it does is hold air and water, and you're going to have to supplement fertilize on a regular basis.
Okay, so I think I'm understanding how you can differentiate between that seed that was started in the peat pot and not putting in a plant in the ground versus you can grow in, what's it called? In hydroponics.
Yes.
And the reason why is because you're talking about the soil. It's about the soil, not about the plant.
Correct.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
Very
it's about your connection to the land.
Okay, that's interesting. I don't know that I agree with that because I haven't really had a chance to think it through, but I'm understanding now why you say one is okay and the other is not, because to me it would seem like they're similar, and to me they're both wrong. But anyhow, again,
that is a question for each one of you to work out with yourselves and with your prayer. You have to figure it out.
Exactly. Okay, same subject with hanging baskets. As long as it's a soilless mix, a hanging basket is fine. Okay. Question, can I sell the fruit from my fruit trees?
No, that's harvesting. That's a definition of harvesting. Okay. Harvesting is gathering for sale or for storage at a later time or use at a later time. No.
Can I water my garden?
Yes, there's no prohibition for watering. There's no prohibition for weeding. However, there is prohibition for the 3 things. No pruning. So if you have a fruit tree and you see it's growing way bigger than you want and it's got suckers all over it, you better do it before the year begins. I've done my entire nursery from top to bottom, inside and out. I even did the woods because I do harvest cordwood. So we went through and opened up all the sides and everything so the light can still get into all the plants that remain. So yes, you cannot prune, you cannot plant in the ground, meaning sow, and harvest, no harvest.
Okay. Can I build a house? Can I dig a hole to build a house?
Yes, because are you growing houses? No, it has to do with the crop. It has to do with a reoccurring crop or a crop that was intended when you planted. You're not growing a house. You need to plant. You need to have a house, so you build a house. Yes, you're disturbing the land, but not in relation to the prohibitions regarding crops.
So what we're getting at then, from this whole conversation, what I'm getting at then is it's about the root system, and it's about Yeshua is the root, and then we are blessed to become the fruit of the tree, but we get our sustenance through the root system, and it comes from the ground. Okay, I am getting this now. I'm starting to really understand not just the actions behind it, but the spiritual implications behind it, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We already talked about if a neighbor gives me vegetables, is that okay? Yes, because it's good stewardship. Okay, can I buy honey during the sabbatical year?
Honey is from a bee. they are gathering the pollen. It's not a fruit. Okay, it's not something that was. You see, they're doing it. And does a bee sin? Is a bee sinning because he's gathering nectar from all these plants that he's not supposed to gather, harvest, whatever you call it?
Right.
It's separate. You don't have to worry about that.
Okay. Mowing the lawn, is that an allowable thing?
Is the lawn? Are you eating the lawn? Are you eating the lawn? No, you didn't plant it for the grass so that you can eat it. So no, it's completely disconnected with regard to harvesting, growing, planting. Yes, I'm going to continue to plant seeds for people who need lawns because it has nothing to do with growing it for a crop and harvesting later. You're mowing it for an aesthetic purpose. It's for the landscaping. It's for your beauty of your neighborhood or whatever. And you know what? Some people live in communities where if they don't mow the lawn, they get fined. So it's important that you do it.
Okay, so I have two questions that sort of go along with that. I use a scythe and I harvest my long grass for hay. So that I can't do because it's the harvest part.
Well, let me give you a little clarification there. If you're harvesting, not harvesting, we're going to say this different. If you're scything it for the day or two to feed to your animals, I think that's fine because it's just that process for each day. You're reaping what's growing of itself for that day, not for you, but for your animals. Now,
because
I think
otherwise I would just let my animal out to that piece of land,
yeah.
But it would have to be fenced in or pegged
Yeah, and
down.
that's personally, I think I would just have my animals and fence them in because then I don't have to scythe it. But if it's something you like to do.
Well, I also can't have my animal out by the road and I side the roadway. But okay. And so the other thing too about this whole landscaping and beautifying, I can plant flowers?
I believe so. Again, you're not eating the flowers. You're planting them for beauty. It has a completely different connotation than crops.
Stuart is totally disagreeing with you.
And it is something you guys are going to have to work with yourselves and thinking it out. Because I do landscaping.
Right.
What am I going to do? Hey, no, I'm sorry, can't plant. Sorry, can't plant anything, can't do anything. I'm out of business is what'll happen.
Right.
But it's not related to crops. Now, let me just clarify something. Again, where's that? Let me get to that.
I think we just got to the root of the reason for this festival, this year-long sabbatical year, is we're trying not to take the sustenance from the ground in order to sustain ourselves. Right?
Yes, okay. That's correct. You're not. See, what happens is and I'll just give you a little brief understanding here. Most plants you plant by seed annually, they just eat up a lot of the nutrients and requirements in the soil quickly. A pumpkin vine, it's a good example. You plant this little bitty seed, next thing you know, get this 40-foot vine with a big pumpkin on it. And you did it in 3 months. It just sucked out so much out of the ground in that short period of time that you can't keep doing it. If you keep planting the squash in the same spot year after year, you will deplete that soil and eventually that will not grow again. You will not have success in getting any crops for your pumpkin because you've depleted the soil. Same thing goes with sowing wheat, barley, anything with seeds in it are annual and tend to grow very quickly and suck all the energy right out. Fruit trees and trees, not, regular trees, maple trees or just trees growing in nature, you don't need to fertilize them. You don't need to do anything. Jehovah takes care of it with the water and so on. He takes care of it. It'll grow slow if it doesn't have enough, but they'll keep living and producing what they have to. Their leaves, their seeds, everything. Life will continue. With regard to fruit trees, you got a little extra thing going on there. They're pulling out a big fruit. Apple trees, for instance. Not only does it have leaves, the body of the tree, it has to continue to produce enough for it to go the next year if you live in the north. but it also puts off fruit, which is taking a lot more energy out of the ground than it normally would. So Jehovah says, don't prune, don't do anything to it. Leave it alone, and you can take what comes of it. Will it still continue to pull out of the ground? Yes. I fertilize my trees. I give them extra. You water them, you give them extra, so that you get a lot of fruit out of it. That's the whole point. But remember, it's all about food. It's all about crops. You're tapping the land of its energy if you go and especially now, agriculture has gotten to the point where everything's modified, so it's really growing and developing much bigger than they used to in the old days. So it's tapping a lot of energy out of the ground.
Okay, so
Normally in the forest that's undisturbed, that is not, you don't go out there, you don't cut trees. A normal unmanaged forest has an ecology, that's the word, an ecology that even if you go out in the middle of an old forest where the trees are giant, you rarely find branches that are on the ground. You'll see a moss-covered branch, and they usually rot very quickly. Within a year or two, this thing is rotted to the ground because you have mycorrhiza, which is fungus. You've got all kinds of funguses that are adding to the tips of the roots of the trees. They're actually extensions, and their symbiotic relationship is actually a tree may go out 2/3 further than its branches, but these mycelium and fungus will go for miles and suck nutrients that are a mile away to that tree because of the relationship. But if you go in there and till it, you just cut all that off. And Jehovah wants it to continue to grow and develop and move these nutrients to where the plants need them. So that's why I believe he puts these things in place, not only for the oath factor of severing ourselves, but the earth is doing the same thing. We're giving it a rest period so it can redevelop its original connection to the roots. Does that make sense?
yeah, no, it makes fabulous sense. We're going to go back to letting people ask questions for a little bit. Paul was up here a second ago. Paul, do you still have a question?
No, I was just going to say what he was saying about the when you give the land the rest, all those nutrients and the bacteria and the fungus, it comes back and grows. That's why you have to let it rest, like Glenn was saying, and he answered that. So I was just going to bring that up. By letting it rest, all those nutrients and mitochondria and all that tiny bacterium that grow and replenish. That's why you got to let it rest every 7 years, because that's what's the problem with the land, the way we do it now, tilling it. When you drive over the ground, you pack it down, you kill all the nutrients just by driving on it. You disturb it and ruin it by harrowing, and that's why a lot of places are going no-till now. So it constantly lets the bacteria, the fungus, the mushrooms, all that stuff, puts the stuff back in that needs to be there. So that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, that's why a lot of times in new construction, you'll see requirements for matting that has to be put down before any heavy equipment gets in there, because it'll destroy the root systems, compact the soil, and it destroys the ecology for a long, long time. And that's why they do that.
Okay. Kurt, you had a question?
Yeah, well, it almost got answered here, I think, because it was about the soil structure. Are we supposed to till the land? Like, would you summer follow a piece and till it in the land Sabbath?
I'll give you an example of what I've done. I have a couple of acres that I usually grow market produce on. And I'm not doing that this year. I take a break. The land's going to take a break. I'm closed for the season regarding my vegetable production. But what I did do was I tilled everything deep. I brought in about 3 to 4 inches of rotted, very key here, rotted chips. And I put on another 2 inches of well-rotted compost on top of that, and I tilled it in. And now it's going to rest. Oh, and I'll give you a reason why I did the compost. I tilled it in, and it will rest until the spring of 24. So that gives it almost 2 seasons, nearly 2 seasons of rotting down and starting to spread that mycelium yeast mat, whatever you want to call it, that I mentioned earlier. But the thing is about the compost is my compost had a bunch of vegetable waste products in it, which has the seeds for the things that will come up of itself. So we'll see what happens. One other thing I did do, I fertilized it and limed the heck out of it, extra heavy, because when you put the chips in, unless they're really well rotted, they're going to draw nutrients away from anything that grows in it. They're going to sequester those nutrients and the plants won't get it. So I'm hoping, we'll see what happens. It's going to be an experiment, how that results in that year 24 when I start planting again. We'll see what happens.
So,
I've done it on a small scale before, and I had used chips that were not well rotted, and it messed things up for a year. So be careful.
so if you were, like, I know you're kind of, let's say, small, probably not small, but relatively compared to what I'm used to seeing. If you had let's say your regular farmer, you got 5,000 acres or something, and you're going to let some of your land rest, and you're going to go to summer follow it, no crop that year. Would you till that land to keep the weeds down? Because if you leave it for the whole season, it might not look so good.
Well,
fall.
I do expect that I'm going to mow it once just to knock the heads down. Okay, so let me just augment what I said. So follow me. What's going to happen is this spring, all of what I did, we're going to start getting weeds. Oh, and I'm sorry. I put cover crop on it. I put winter rye on it. So the winter rye is going to come up. It's going to shade everything. It's going to grow up, and it should be tilled around by June 1st, certainly. Because if I don't, they're going to be 3 feet high. The seeds are going to fall back on it, and it's not going to do what I want. So what I'm going to do is before the seed heads produce on this annual winter rye, I'm going to cut it once. And all these greens are going to fall back on the ground, and they're going to rot and start releasing their nutrients back in the soil. But what's going to happen now that it's going to look like, you see Shane's picture or persona on here, it's all just dead stuff. That's what it's going to look like. I'm going to knock the heads off. The heads are going to fall to the ground, and they're going to start to rot, releasing their nutrients that they've sucked in from the fertilizer and the compost I had in it. And then the little seeds, the summer annuals, the tomatoes, the peppers, the eggplants, the whatever, is going to grow through that and come out. And in June, July, August, September, I should have some things that come up of itself. We'll see what happens. I'm not sure about this.
Good.
Okay.
Thanks, Glenn.
So
Yep.
Kurt's question is over now. I'd like to go to Shane is looking up the word sow, and we're going to look for that noon that Glenn mentioned.
I hope it's there because I thought I saw it some time ago.
Zara.
Maybe it isn't.
Okay, so if we go down a little bit, looking for Zayin Resh Ayin. Oh, down here, down at the bottom. Zara on sown. Can you click that word?
Click the word.
Oh, what is it? H2235.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay.
There we
Zeroah and Zeroan, which means something that is sown. So it's a past tense of the sown, only in the plural. That is a vegetable as a food or a pulse.
So it's still referring to seeds.
Yep. But the seed with the noon at the end, which is the continuance of it.
Yes.
Right? Interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know. I thought it was in the original word, but apparently it's not. But it's still connotation to seeds.
Right.
And this is where, again, back to, let me find out where that is. I had put a note in our discussion about when you come into the land and have planted all types of fruit trees. I don't recall where that is in our notes, but if we can look that up, you tell me what that is saying. And I believe that you can plant fruit trees according to that. Why would it say that? It's actually contradictory if you think about it.
Well, because you can't, if you're planting a fruit tree, you can't take of it for the first, what is it, 3 years, 4 years anyhow?
Correct. So think about this. So, okay, next year is a sabbatical year. If you can plant the fruit tree, usually it'll be in a pot. You're not going to go plant a, Johnny apple seed in the ground because you're never going to get an apple out of it. That's not how apple trees grow.
Right.
They're grafted. None of them, not a single apple tree or fruit tree that you ever buy, there are a few exceptions, are grafted. They're not seed. You can't take a seed out of an apple and try to grow it. You can, but it's going to turn into this wild thing that probably won't produce much. But anyways, you buy a tree.
Seeds. You can't put potato seeds in the ground to get potatoes out of them.
Yes, exactly. You're futile, your effort. You might get one potato plant out of 50 you put in, maybe. So you have to nurse these things along, certain things, not like, grasses and so on. Some of them you just plant directly sown in the ground and you're good. But some of these, like fruit trees, you can't. You need to either dig them up, having nurtured them next to your house and grow them to 1 foot, 2 foot, 5 foot, and then finally you dig them up and move them. That's how you do it. That's how we do it in the nursery. You start with a small pot, you grow it from seed in the greenhouse, you get it over 2-3 years, then you grow on. And there's grafting involved too. So by the time you buy a fruit tree, typically a small fruit tree, even mail order, is going to be at least 3 years old to start with, because you got the graft of the root, and then the next step's the budding, and then the third step is at least 1 year. So you got 3 years if you're buying it at the smallest size. So you figure you're getting a 3-year-old plant, you plant it in the ground, you still got, you can count from the beginning of its growth. That's 3 years. So the 4th year is circumcised, so you don't eat of it. But the 5th, 6th, you can. Now, if you were starting on the sabbatical year to plant a fruit tree, and you went really strict with the 4 years, you're only going to get the 5th year and the 6th year, and then you can't eat it. You can't harvest in the 7th year. Pardon?
Right. Then you got to do your sabbatical year.
Exactly. So you're not getting a whole lot out of this thing the first 7 years, anyways.
You're not planting an apple tree for yourself. You're planting it for the next generation.
Yes, it's a legacy. Exactly. Yeah.
So
I believe you can plant fruit trees. You can plant blueberry bushes. You can plant raspberry bushes. I would stay away from strawberries and some of the smaller ones because they have a 2 and 3 year cycle.
Okay. So let's move on then to Holly, your question.
So, hi, Glenn.
Hi.
So we can harvest what comes up when we need to eat it. So we do it every day. But what about when we harvest and we make like a meal and then we have leftovers? Do we have to finish all the food that day and not store leftovers because that's harvesting and holding on to things?
Well, I think we're getting into the minutia that Sombra was talking about. I think if you're making a main meal, again, you don't have to pick just for that day. I would say if you're going out to the field, you know, pick 2-3 days worth and expect to eat it. Don't sit there and pick 3 days and then eat one and then throw the rest out or let it rot on the shelf, because that's really wasting it, because the other animals don't have a chance to get it, or other people don't have a chance to get it because now it's sitting in your counter. Okay, so take 2 or 3 days, you process it for your meal, which is the main reason you're doing it. If you got leftovers, I don't think it's going to be a big deal if you took the leftovers, which you, rather than throwing it out, you put it in the freeze dryer and you get it for another time. But that's something each one of you are going to have to determine yourself. If you've got a lot of, you know, you only ate 1/4 of the food and you're putting away the whole thing, well, you know, I don't know. Are you violating the intent? I think you might be. So just watch out on that. The purpose is not to store it. The purpose is for the meal of that day.
Yeah,
Kind of
Stuart
follow?
mentioned before that we have a really good pattern in the gathering of the manna. 5 days of the week, if you gather more than what you need for that day, it goes bad. On the 6th day, you're supposed to gather twice what you need so that you can have it for the 6th day and the 7th day. So it might behoove us to follow that pattern as well, even if we have what we call the technology, right?
I have a Glenism.
Yes.
My understanding that I'm getting out of that is that the manna was perishable after that day. The reason that you boiled it and seethed it and did what you had to do is so you could keep it for the 7th day.
Well, even if you boiled it on the 4th day, you couldn't keep it to the 5th day. It went bad.
I don't know. There's no example in scripture that says, oh, he tried it on the 5th day, boiled it, and he kept it for the 6th day. No, it does. There's nothing there. But what I'm getting at is there's something to do with the manner that it would not keep for the next day unless it was boiled and seethed and cooked.
I think it has to do with the principle. The principle is
I agree.
Provide for yourself 6 days.
Yeah.
On the
Well,
7th, the Lord provides for you.
Yeah. Yes, I understand that, but I think we're trying to maybe force fit a Sabbath rest, weekly Sabbath rest requirement with a sabbatical land rest requirement. And there's 2 different things. One was for man to rest. The other was for the land to rest.
Right. And your fridge is not the land. Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, so yeah, that's where I'm going with it. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to Steve. And this will be the last question from a hands up. Stuart and Shane, if there's any questions in the chat that you think need to be covered, let me know. Steve is going to have the last voice, and then we're going to move on to another subject on the same subject. Confusing.
Okay, this is for Glenn, right? What do you think about, it's about nutrients, right? This is all about nutrients in the soil. That's why you're looking at land. Well, this is a bit off, but I'm still going to ask it. Nutrients in pots and manure. What could you speak a quick thing about that? Could you grow things in pots, right? What do you think about nutrients in pots?
Yes. Again, if you're doing it properly, you're not using soil from the land. You're using soilless mix, and soilless mix is a mined product, and it does not hold nutrients. It will not. The only thing that's holding the nutrients in this media is the water that's diluted in the water. It's in solution. So what you need to do is you're going to need to do one of 2 things or both. You're going to need to use a slow release granular fertilizer on the top, which is all different kinds, or supplement with water soluble fertilizer, which is like Miracle Grow or Peter's Miracle Grow, which is in suspension. So again, when you pour the water, which has the fertilizer in solution, just like salt or sugars in solution, it sits in the water in that soil media, and the plant's roots have access to it. But if you go and water with clean water, the next watering, all of that is washed out the bottom, and you don't have any fertilizer in the soil column, in the media column anymore.
What about manure? What about manure?
Manure? Yeah, I would use some really fresh compost, or not fresh, really well-rotted compost or manure. But now let me explain what happens there. Manure and compost will not release their nutrients until the microbes, the bacteria, whatever it is broken it down enough. And they are active at high temperatures and not at low temperatures. So what can happen is if you have a plant, you just put some manure in it, it's doing fine. All of a sudden, a month later, it warms up. We get a 90-degree temperatures, and the plant will die because there's such a release of this nitrogen into the soil that the plant, into the media, that the plant can't handle it. That's a burn. That's a burn off. So it's almost better sometimes to use the synthetic. The plants don't know the difference. And there is no life in your soilless mix that you're killing anyway. That's why a lot of people don't use synthetic fertilizer on the land, because it can affect earthworms, bacteria, and all the life and ecology that's in it. So you want to just be aware of these things. Try, if you're not familiar with this, don't use manure or compost.
Can I just interrupt you, mate? You know, like what I do is, what I seem to found to work is I use nettles, right? I put nettles in water and let them rot in there, and then that seems to do the plants well. You know, that makes sense.
Can you get closer to your mic? I couldn't hear what it was you were using.
Nettles.
Okay.
Yeah, I put nettles in water, right? And they rot down, and they form a kind of pasting, and then I put it, and it seems to work on the soil.
You know, you could do that, because what's basically happening is the nettle, which has drawn the nutrients out of the ground, and it's in the body of the plant, is now, when it rots, starts to release those nutrients, just like my cover crop that I talked about is going to release its nutrients once I cut the tops. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So, yep.
That's the easy way to do it for me anyway. You know,
yep. You just got to be careful, Steve, because you're not necessarily getting all the nutrients that your plants require from the nettle. Okay. Nettle will support nettle. It may not support, you know, a pumpkin or whatever it is you're growing.
Okay, so Philemon had his hand up, and did you still have a question, Philemon?
There's something I'm getting. Oh, first, Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shalom.
There's something I'm getting. I don't know who talked about it. Maybe Sister Sombra, who was talking about following the pattern. And from what we were examining, the Israelites had to collect the manna on the first, second, just for that particular day. And then on the sixth day, they were to collect, because the following day was the Sabbath. So I was maybe I'm seeing something that it means on the Sabbath day, people should not go out either to cook or something, because I don't know whether the topic is controversial, which I don't like, but maybe clarification on that. If when following the pattern on the sixth day, they were to collect enough for the following day. So does it mean, because up to date to us at Rusinga House of Torah, we still cook on the Sabbath day after we come from church?
So that is what I do on the preparation day, is I cook meals for 2 days. And so I cook a meal for Friday night, and then I cook a meal for Saturday. And so, yes, I avoid cooking on Shabbat. The commandment is, it's harder to find, but it has to do with not expecting your servants to work. It has to do with not creating a fire. It has to do, again, with this whole manna thing, not harvesting your manna on Shabbat. It has to do with not going to market on Shabbat. So in the same way, you're not supposed to cook on Shabbat. And however, there are Sabbath-like days that you are allowed to cook on, because some Sabbath days are Sabbath day back to back. And so we're not commanded to not cook for 3 days or 2 days. So, yes, if you have some means of not cooking on Shabbat, that would be best.
Okay, thank you very much.
See, I have my own thoughts on that too. But again, you know, you do what you think is right. But, you know, yes, you're not supposed to have a 10-course meal on Sabbath. No, but yes, I do toast my toast. I do warm water up or nuke, which I know that's not great, but, you know, warm something up in the microwave. But I'm understanding that he ceased creating on the Sabbath. We shouldn't be creating either, creating fire, working for making things, creating. He ceased from creating. We need to cease from creating too. I think that's what part of it comes in. If you're cooking, you're creating something. You're changing the parameters of one thing into another. Yeah. So I see
like
that.
You wouldn't build a house on Shabbat.
Right. Exactly. And you certainly wouldn't hire anybody to do it for you either.
Right. Because they stopped when they were building the tabernacle, even though building the tabernacle is a form of worship, they stopped building the tabernacle on Shabbat. Jimmy just asked, do I prepare coffee? And the truth is, yes, I prepare coffee on Shabbat. And I have a salad right here that my husband has brought me that I will eat. There wasn't any cooking involved in that. But yes, I will eat it once I'm off camera. And I do heat up. Often what I'll do is I'll make a stew and then I'll just reheat the stew. Which technically I'm still using the oven or the stove or whatever to reheat it. But again, Shabbat is made for man, not man for the Sabbath, right? I'm not supposed to suffer on Shabbat.
You're keeping the spirit of it. You're resting. We're doing this. We're studying. We're worshiping. All of the things, the weightier matters are being kept. And that's the same thing with the sabbatical year. Are we keeping the weightier matters and not messing up the finer matters?
Right.
He wants both together. Yeah.
Right. So we just left the subject of sabbatical year. And for a moment, I'd like to go back to a question I answered back here that had to do with Passover. And just a minute, where did it go? Shane, you're ready to do? No, Shane's got his hand up for something else, but somebody asked me a question about Passover. Oh, the question about Passover was, is baking soda considered leaven? And my answer to baking soda is considered leaven is no, because it's not organic. It's a chemical reaction. And so yes, in the chemical reaction, it creates bubbles in your muffins that makes your muffin puff up, but it is not organic. It doesn't grow. And so the difference between the Hebrew word chametz and this chemical reaction is that the chametz, if I take some sourdough, if I take a lump of sourdough and I put it in my fresh flour and water, I can mix it together and it will grow into that. Whereas if I put, if I take my muffin mix and I have a leftover tablespoon or so of muffin mix and I put it into another muffin mix, but I don't put any baking powder in it, I will not end up with nice puffy muffins because I don't have enough of that chemical in it to create the little holes. And so, no, it's not the same thing. Now, there are some Jewish groups who consider anything that puffs up. So you wouldn't eat puffed wheat, you wouldn't eat rice, you wouldn't eat, there's all kinds of things that when you add it to water, it swells. There are Jewish groups who choose not to eat any of that. We tried to do that one year and there was nothing to eat. It was awful. There was nothing to eat. Okay, I want to change the subject and go on to the about the debts. Shane, do you have a question about debts, or is it still about the land?
It was about Glenn mentioned burnout on these plants from.
Okay, go
so
ahead.
my question is, chicken manure. I'm kind of afraid now you mentioned this. I wonder if I put too much of it around some of my trees and stuff, if that may have burned them out.
Well, are you seeing
Or is it-
problem?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly which ones burned. They kind of like just burned up, and I'm wondering if that wasn't some
Well,
of that.
let me explain what happens with fertilizer. Even natural fertilizers, it increases the salt. Salt is not good in excess. Salt removes moisture. So imagine your lawn, just equate it to lawn. It's a growing thing. You got a lawn, it's the middle of summer, it's brown. If you go fertilize it, you're probably going to kill it. Okay? Because now it's dry already, and now you're adding more of that problem because the salt's actually going to take even more moisture away from the cells. So you got to be careful there. So, but if you're doing it in the spring, or whenever your rainy season is, you're probably not going to have that problem. Especially even if you did overdo it, because you're going to have enough moisture that it's going to wash through, erode, leach away. It's not going to be so concentrated on the root system. But with natural, like chicken manure, which is already strong to begin with, especially if it's not well rotted, can give you that burn that I talked about, especially when there's low moisture, especially when there's low moisture. That's key. And the temperatures are high. So because the microbial activity goes way up exponentially, the hotter the temperature is. So if you're 50 degrees, and all of a sudden we get 90s for a week, and then your plant dies, and you had put chicken manure there, more than likely it's connected. Okay. So you got to remember what you did and see if it's within that time period. Same thing can happen if you miscalculate on synthetic fertilizer. So if you think you've overdone it, and before you start seeing symptoms of problems, but you're pretty sure you overdid it, go out there and irrigate the heck out of it. So the water will lessen that effect. It'll disseminate that fertilizer out for a larger area and not be so critical. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So do you put manure on yours, chicken manure, or do you not?
I use everything I can because the way the prices are now, fertilizers have just about tripled in less than 2 years. And I use everything I can from nature, compost, rotted, anything I can get, I try to use.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, now we're going to move to the second part of the sabbatical year. And this is regarding debts. So in the sabbatical year, Deuteronomy 15, verses 1 through 18. And Shane, if you want, you can put this up. I will just read from my screen here. It says, at the end of every 7 years, you shall make a release. And this is the manner of the release. Every man who has a loan to his neighbor shall release it. He shall not exact it from his neighbor or from his brother, because it is called Jehovah's release. You may exact it from a foreigner, but your hand shall release that which is yours with your brother, except when there shall be no poor among you. For Jehovah shall greatly bless you in the land which Jehovah your God gives you for an inheritance to possess it. Only if you carefully listen to the voice of Jehovah your God, to be careful to do all these commandments which I command you today, for Jehovah your God blesses you as he promised you. And you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. And you shall reign over many nations, but they shall not reign over you. If there is among you a poor man of one of your brothers, inside any of your gates in your land, which Jehovah your God gives you, you shall not harden your heart nor shut your hand from your poor brother, but you shall open your hand wide to him, and shall surely lend him enough for his need, that which he lacks. Beware that there is not a thought in your wicked heart, saying, the 7th year, the year of release, is at hand, and your eye may be evil against your poor brother, and you give him nothing. And he may cry to Jehovah against you, and it is sin to you. You shall surely give him, and your heart shall not be grieved when you give him, because for this thing Jehovah your God shall bless you in all your works, in all that you put to your hand to. For the poor shall never cease out of the land. Therefore I command you, saying, you shall open your hand wide to your brother, to your poor, and to your needy in your land. If your brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you and serves you 6 years, then in the 7th year you shall let him go free from you. And when you send him out free from you, you shall not let him go away empty. You shall richly bestow on him from your flock, and from your grain floor, and from your winepress, with what Jehovah your God has blessed you, you shall give to him. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Jehovah your God redeemed you. Therefore I command you this thing today. And if he says to you, I will not go away from you, because he loves you and your house, because it has been good for him with you, then you shall take an awl and put it through his ear in the door, and he shall be your servant forever. And also to your slave girl you shall do. It shall not seem hard to you when you send him away from you free, for he has been worth a double hired servant serving you for 6 years, and Jehovah your God shall bless you in all that you do. So we have spent a lot of time talking about the land and the food and the deeper spiritual meaning of what it is that we're doing during the sabbatical year. Let's talk about this redeeming of debts or releasing of debts.
May I?
Yeah, absolutely.
I understand that to be is a few things. All right. There's personal and there's business. And I'm sure that applied then as well. And it's about oppressing. Okay. So I don't have that problem because I generally either give somebody the money or I don't let it stretch out to long periods of time. All right. Now, if somebody that is not business has borrowed money from me and I can see they're having a hard time paying it back, of course, in the sabbatical year, it's forgiven. And I believe I've had in 2016, I had somebody who walked away with over $6,000 worth of rental arrears, and I've forgiven them because there was no way of getting it, for one, and they're still doing their same old thing that many years later, so they're a hopeless cause. But the point is, I just forgave him. And I don't know if it helped him or not, because he's still doing the same thing he did before. So he didn't grow in it. But now when it comes to business, again, there as well, you need to decide. I believe it says you can exact it from the foreigner. And unless this business relationship is with somebody who's a brother in the faith, I would question whether it depends on the situation, whether I would forgive them this debt or not. But technically, in business, that's a different thing because it was meant to be for profit. It's not like I'm buying a house and it's for my family and now I can't make it work. I lost my job. I broke my leg. Those are all legitimate reasons for going into debt because you have a hardship. But if you're in business and you're a lousy manager, I'm sorry, you did that. I didn't do that. That has nothing to do with me. And, you really owe it to me. You're actually causing me a hardship by not paying me back. And then sometimes these people will go into another business, go bankrupt, go in another business, on and on and on. So I would look at it depending on the situation. But yes, we're not to oppress. If you see someone who's having trouble, you're really supposed to help them.
So I really do see a lot of this has to do with the poor, because people go into debt because they're poor. Investing or taking out a loan is different if you're investing in your business. That doesn't have anything to do with poverty.
Correct.
So yeah, I see the same thing. Michelle?
Yeah, my question is what happens if someone steals money from you? How does that affect? Because it's not giving, it's been stolen by stealth.
Well, the Torah has remedy, and they have to pay you back. What is it? Double, triple? I'm not sure exactly what the details are, but that's restitution, confession, restitution, repentance. It's all in.
Doesn't apply to the releasing of what someone's stolen from you.
I suppose it could.
Well, so unless you plan to go to court in order to get that theft returned to you, because a theft is not you giving of generosity. Theft is theft. And so let's take it out of 2023 and put it back to, temple days. If somebody stole something from you, you would go to the Sanhedrin, and the judges in the Sanhedrin would listen to the testimony and they would render a judgment. And that person who stole from you would have to make restitution. Okay, so bring it back to 2023. If somebody stole from you, we have things like small claims court. You can take it to court. You can bring your testimony. And if it's proved that this person stole from you, the judge will render a verdict and the judge will make that person pay back what they stole from you. And if they can't pay it back, then chances are they're going to have to serve time. And unfortunately, that doesn't always get you back what they stole from you.
Okay, thank you.
But on the subject of forgiving a person, let's say hypothetically we're talking about family members. If a family member stole something from you and you can't get that thing back from the family member, your relationship with that family member has been damaged. And even if you cannot restore the relationship with the person, you still need to forgive them which is different from the releasing of the debts. You still need to forgive them, because what they've done is they've wounded you by doing this action. And if you don't forgive them, then that wound is going to fester in you, and it's going to manifest into sin somewhere else. What I mean is, if this person has stolen something from you, your now reaction is going to be to protect yourself, and you're going to assume that all these different relationships in your life, that they're also going to steal from you. So you're going to be very guarded and jaded, and you won't be freely giving of yourself and also your belongings to share with the people that you love in your life. That ends up sinning against, this other family member who had nothing to do with that family member. Now you're taking out your reaction to this family member on that family member, and that ends up sinning, and it just perpetuates the wound along the path. So no, it's not a releasing of the debt.
It's just the right thing to do. Yeah.
I would say you still need to forgive that person, even if you take that person to court. Those are two separate things. And you have a right to take that person to court, but you have a responsibility to forgive them for your own spiritual and mental health.
Okay, thank you.
There's a good question in the chat from Kurt regarding foreigner. It's an interesting word regarding what is a foreigner? What is a brother? Okay, what is business? All those questions come to mind. We need to define those. A brother to me is either related as a brother, or certainly is related in our beliefs. Like, we're all brothers and sisters here because we are all on the same in unity of spirit in Torah.
Right.
And a foreigner to me is someone who is not in Torah and a brother and or related to me. But that depends. If I have a good relationship with somebody who's not in Torah, I'm certainly going to keep in mind their oppression and forgive them if that's what it needs to be. I'm not going to go to the letter of it and say, no, you owe it to me no matter what.
Right.
In fact, there's another question that's sort of related to that above Kurt's, and it says, what if somebody wants to borrow from you during the sabbatical year? Do you just give it to him? Would you be obligated to give knowing that you will not get it back? Well, if they're borrowing, you don't need to know the personal details, but if they're business borrowing, that's a whole nother ballgame. And I would not consider it part of this requirement. But if they're oppressed and they need the money, well, they're asking for help.
Yeah.
And then if you're in a position to help, I think you almost kind of have to, no matter to what extent that help may be, you have to determine that.
Well, one of the things when Jenny was praying, and she was praying through the alphabet, the letter Kaf looks, sorry, I can't tell if this is the right way or not. Kaf, I don't know. Either way, it's the open hand. Now, sometimes we look at it as the open hand that covers, in other words, the wings. Sometimes we look at it as the open hands like this, and it's generosity. So when Jehovah created the world, he created the world with open hands. He was generous. He created the garden for us. He created a beautiful place for us to live in. But at the same time, he covered and protected us within the garden. And so the covenant is also a covering. And when you think about it, these are wings. And so this is the same thing as the tzitzit. The tzitzit are the wings. Okay, so I want to go back to that toshav, or the ger toshav. Shane.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you go back to that? Sorry, the foreigner. because we didn't get to look at that.
Oh, yeah.
So anyhow, that's a character of God. We can't stop having the character of God just because it's the sabbatical year. That doesn't make sense. Okay, so we have to look at two words. This one is toshav, which is a dweller, not outlandish, especially as distinguished from a native citizen, active participle, and is a temporary inmate, a mere lodger, a resident, an alien, a foreigner, inhabitant, sojourner, stranger. So go down a little bit so that we could see the root of that word, shav, turn. So the root of this word, sheen, bet, is a picture of two front teeth pressing, representing pressing, and the tent is a picture of a tent, combining these two meanings, to press to the tent. A place of dwelling as the place turned to, a turning back or away from someone or something, a captive. A captive is one turned away from a place of dwelling. Okay, so then that word toshav, can we go back up? So you've got a tet in front of a tet or a tet vav in front of the shav. And so Kurt, help me here. Jenny, are you still here?
I'm working on it. The root word isn't the root word is yod sheen bet. It's not tav sheen bet. Look at the 3427.
Yes.
That's yod sheen bet. Yeshav or Yeshav or something.
Okay. To sit down as judge, in ambush, in quiet, by implication, to dwell, to remain, causatively, to settle, to marry, to make abide, to dwell, ease, establish, fail, habitation.
Sounds like somebody that's potentially with you, but is not completely invested in the same thing that you are. That's
Sounds like a resident alien or something.
Yes, exactly.
To me, Yod Shin Bet Noon. So Yod Shin Bet Noon is a colonizer, settler, bottom part posterior. Your butt.
Yes, because you're putting your bum down on the ground and you're sitting there, right? So it's kind of like squatting.
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
That makes sense.
Gives some context to what those guys do, right? They sit down
and once they're sitting there, you can't make them move, right?
You got to pick them up, yeah.
Right. But that doesn't mean they're one of you. So it all comes to mindset, right? Somebody might be your next door neighbor, but your next door neighbor doesn't necessarily think as you think, which is why, even though we are spread across the world, we are brothers, we are sisters, we're brethren, because we think alike. But the lady who lives right in the house next door to me, she's a foreigner. She doesn't think like me at all.
Right.
The other word might give us context, because there seems to be a difference between the two words. Foreigner is the English used for both of them, but there seems to be actually something different about them.
Well, there's also the word ger toshav. And a ger, I think, is somebody who joined you, who was from away, who came to you and chose to join you. In other words,
grafted in.
Yeah, grafted in. They came, they squatted, but then their mindset changed and they became one of you. And that's what we are. You know, we are the wild branch. We're the ger toshav.
There is a difference. The 5237 word. Like if you look up the other word for foreigner, the one that comes from Deuteronomy 15:3, there seems to be a difference between the two. They maybe shouldn't be.
Yes.
Foreigner might not be the correct way to translate them because there seems to be a difference.
Yes. So somebody who's not as vested into Torah like we are has a different thinking and feels differently about the situation. You know what I mean? They're just not. They're not part of the family. They're different. Their living is different. They're not vested in with the same God.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can't. I'll give you a simple example. Wouldn't it be great if everybody kept Torah?
Wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it?
You wouldn't
That's
have to
the
worry
point.
about when something was grown or not.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to worry about people stealing. You wouldn't have to worry about a lot of things, but it's not the case. But between brothers, us, I trust every one of you.
Right.
I'd leave my doors unlocked. I'd leave everything. I'd leave the keys in the truck. I trust you because you have this a higher standard than the rest of the world.
Right. Well, and that's because we've put the word of God on the doorposts of our house, right?
Exactly.
You know, you walk into my house, Torah applies in my house. I'm going to treat you according to Torah, and I expect you to behave according to Torah. And if you're a Nikri, I'm not going to let you in. If you are a Toshav, I'm going to be more open to letting you in, especially if you're a Ger Toshav, right? Because you have to be careful who you let in your house.
And
Okay.
all of this requires discernment.
Yeah.
That we can only get from the Torah.
Right.
Well, it seems like the first one is the one we looked at is somebody who kind of is willing to be with you, maybe act like you. But the other word from Deuteronomy 15 is, it doesn't have the same, it's more foreign,
right.
More strange, more different.
Yeah.
It's
more like the, like the, what do you call it? The Silk Roads, right?
Well,
You've got a foreigner who's a merchant who comes from far away. He's nothing like you, doesn't speak the same language as you. He maybe doesn't have the same currency as you. He worships a foreign god than you. And so when he travels through town, he's not really welcome at your fire.
That's kind of what I see. It's Noon Ka Fresh, and it says something strange, unexpected calamity, strange. And 5237 is second form, strange in a variety of degrees and applications, foreign, non-relative,
disaster,
adulterous, different, wonderful, alien, foreigner, outlandish, stranger, woman.
Right.
So maybe, well, the first thing that comes to mind is Fruit Loops.
Yeah.
And it says disaster in definition 2 down there.
Right.
Yeah, there seems to be a difference between the two words.
So that
maybe
means you're not releasing your debt to that kind of foreigner, whereas the foreigner who's come to sit by your fire, if he's poor, you might forgive his debt.
That seems to be the difference. Yeah. Somebody that's like, I guess, worthy to be forgiven of debt, and somebody else who's like, I'm sorry, you're not qualified. You're just too weird.
Right.
So essentially that means basically we each have to make that decision.
Right.
And I know that Joe has spoken in the past that he's actually forgiven business debt, and he didn't want to. He was really hard about making that decision, but he did.
And he
So,
was blessed for it, right?
and he was blessed for it. Yep, absolutely. So it doesn't necessarily mean he did wrong. He did right by being generous, and he got rewarded. So it all depends on what each of us, needs to discern from our predicaments with these debtors.
So Vivian's asked another question. What's the difference between release in the sabbatical year and release in the Jubilee year?
Yeah. So in the sabbatical year, I see it as money mostly. But there's that section that talks about the bond servant, which they can choose to stay with you, and they love you and they love your family and they want to become one with you. That's one thing. But the Jubilee has
Like
to
an
do with,
adoption, right? You
Yes.
adopt him as your son.
yep. And whereas the Jubilee has to do with the returning of your land back in Israel. The Jubilee is referring to you going back to your possession, which was your ancestors all the way back at Sinai. But I don't know how that would apply today, other than the debt forgiving. Again, you still have to forgive the debt the previous year of a Jubilee year anyways. So, wow, I mean, I think the same thing applies in the Jubilee, but it's about going back to your possession.
It's like putting the tribes back together.
Yeah.
It's that same picture as when the children of Israel came out of Egypt and they were a mixed multitude, but then they put up the banners and everyone went under the appropriate banners. It's a reconstruction, reordering of the system. It's like, well, what's that thing they're talking about in 2030? I can't remember what it's called, but they basically want to go to net zero, right? Everybody starts off from.
Oh, yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah,
Can't
that's
do that.
nuts. Well, yeah, but it's a lot like Jubilee.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Agenda 2030, yeah.
You see, and I noticed some patterns, and I really just, what is it? You see a pattern in the stock market where every 7 years there's a crunch or whatever, a crash that coincides with the. I'm getting a feedback here that's listening to you.
That's Susan.
Yeah. So I see that. I've seen that. You can prove it. You can go look on the stock market for a number of years, and you can see where the sabbatical year is a big jump, a big adjustment. And whether we do it voluntarily or not, it happens. With a Jubilee, I see a connection with the Jubilee coming in 2045. I didn't see it in the Jubilee of 1996, but maybe if I looked harder, I could see something. But we're going into our new home in 2045 or before, but it's a whole reset. It's a whole going back to your source. And did they not do that in the Jubilee of entering the land? Wasn't that a Jubilee too? Or was it just
when
a
they crossed
sabbatical?
over the Jordan, that was a Jubilee.
Right. Yes. So they got their possession. They went back into their possession. So I find that really interesting.
Susan asked you a question.
Well, to me, this is the release of people is referred to with Zedekiah and when Babylon came in. I think I'm right. And the people were released. They let all their servants go.
Yep.
And they were made to go and get them back and bring them back. They weren't allowed to go after all.
Oh,
And
right.
That
Yes.
really bothers me, so I just thought I'd bring it up.
Was that a sabbatical or a Jubilee?
I think it was sabbatical, but it sounds more like the Jubilee year.
Now, when Nehemiah went back to build a temple. I wonder if that was coincided with the sabbatical or Jubilee. That'd be interesting. I'm not sure.
I don't know anything about Zedekiah, so y'all have baffled me. I have to.
Zedekiah was the one who had his eyes poked out after he saw his sons killed, I believe. So he had a terrible thing happen to him, probably because of that.
Jeremiah was put into a dungeon.
Yep.
Okay. Alrighty. Oh, look, Ella has her hand up.
Just got a question, maybe a little bit off topic, but is there any historical reference for the ending of any millennium into the next? Did they just transition from, say, the first 50 years or the 300 and I guess 49, 353, whatever, first millennium to the second millennium to the third millennium to the fourth to the fifth to the end of that? Is there any historical reference as to what actually took place? Was there a change of any kind?
You know, it'd be good to look at Joe's charts to see if there is. And I would bet if somebody did some checking in history, we could plug in a few more things that might have a pattern. That's interesting. Good
I was kind
question.
of thinking about that this week. I mean, we're going into the seventh and expecting big things between now and then. Was there anything at the end of any of these going into the next that's showed up in history?
Well, from 50 to 51, there is nothing. From 30 to 31, which is the fourth millennial into the fifth millennial, we have going into, so in the 30th Jubilee cycle, we have the death of Yeshua and the persecution of the saints. But that's not right at the end. That's in the middle of that 30th Jubilee cycle. And then in the 31st Jubilee cycle, we have the second persecution of the saints and the third persecution of the saints. Let's go back this way. Going from the 10th or the third millennial day into the fourth millennial day. There's not much here. It says it's a sabbatical year recorded. Solomon begins to reign as king over Israel.
Hey, Sombra, go back to page 15 in the charts.
Page 15 on the charts. Yep.
Look at the green. Isn't that the 50th Jubilee cycle there?
Well, it is, but that's the middle of the millennial. That's not, so they're asking the question at the end of a millennial day to the beginning of a millennial day. But yes, this is lots of big stuff that's happening here. Yeah. That's at the beginning. That's like the burning bush and Moses and the 10 plagues and leaving Egypt. Yeah, that's a big thing.
Yeah, it says when Israel became a nation.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think Sarkis had some discussion about this in the past, where it coincides with why Jehovah was planning that Exodus the way he did. It has to do with that Jubilee, going back to your possession. And he has his hand up.
And he has his hand up.
A couple things though. Actually, I learned it from Joe. I took his ideas, and that's how I present the Sabbatical and Jubilee to my friends and customers, is to explain to them that he put it there purposely to demonstrate to us his timing. And we see that the Exodus is happened on the 50th Jubilee. On the 49 Jubilee toward the 50th, which is, right at the beginning of the 50th, and they entered the land on the 50th. But the whole concept behind that is that he is demonstrating his plan of salvation. And if we don't remember the sabbatical and Jubilee years, we will not understand his plan of salvation, which is explained through the feast that we have on annual basis, from weekly Shabbat to the Feast of Unleavened Bread, to the Feast of Shavuot, Pentecost, to the Feast of Sukkot, Feast of Tabernacle. They all are connected. And then when we look at sabbatical and Jubilee years, the only thing that connects sabbatical and Jubilee years to the annual feast days is Yom Kippur, which is that's the year of the day that you do the release of Jubilee. If we look at Leviticus 25, and why is it so important? Is because we have forgotten how to literally demonstrate our love for our neighbors. What is the greatest commandment? They asked Yeshua. Yeshua said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength. But then he says the second commandment is this: love your neighbor as yourself. And Jehovah demonstrates to us how to love our neighbors by practicing the sabbatical and Jubilee years, because that's his welfare program. That's why he says you will not have any poor, you're not going to have any people who are left out as orphans, as widows, as people who are homeless, because the sabbatical and Jubilee years are meant his welfare program. So if you had a bad incidents in your life and you get in debt and you're homeless, what do? You don't just go feed the people and say, see you later. You say, okay, here's some food, here's some shelter. What do we need to do to help you get on your feet, get up on your feet again? How do you do that? You don't give money away. You give him a place where he feels secure, he has safety, and that's at your house or your business. And then you say, okay, I'm going to pay your salary or whatever payment we agree on, and you're going to work for me so many years until you are up and ready to go, take care of your business, your family, and your property, and then you send him back with money and goods when he's done. If you end up buying his property because he or a stranger would have taken it away buy it from him or taken it away, you rescue him, because you're going to give his property back at the end of the Jubilee, because that's Jehovah's plan of salvation, of redemption, to give people a second chance, a third chance. And he uses you and me to do that. And that's why it's important to connect that to another passage, Isaiah 58. In Isaiah 58, it's talking about keeping the Sabbath and fasting. And then he mentions about how we don't take care of the poor and the homeless and the widows. And on top of that, we don't give them what is right price for their labor. We negotiate them to a point where they stay poor, they never recover.
They're slaves forever.
They become almost slaves. And by the way, we are already, but we don't recognize it. So I ask people, who owns your house? And they say, I do. I said, no, you don't. You're a tenant. Look at your deed. The government owns your property and you are a tenant and you pay your property tax. If you don't pay, they'll kick you out. And by the way, who owns your paycheck? The government takes first before you get any portion of it nowadays. You pay your taxes, you don't pay. The government come after you and put you in prison. In the old days, we had debtors prison. Today, people forget those things. So what is the purpose of sabbatical and jubilee years? Is to remind us this is Jehovah's welfare program, not just for the ground. Everybody focuses on the land. The land is a tool, as a mean to help us understand why he wants us to do it. And that is to show that he loves us so much that he wants us to love others as well. And it's all about cycling the love of Jehovah, passing it on as we experiencing it, is passing it on. And that's what Jubilee, Sabbatical and Jubilee is all about. And just in the chat, Israel became a nation in 1948. In reality, they came in 47. It's just the nations recognized it in 1948. And so we need to remember that was Jubilee. They came back to the land, and that sets the stage again to help us understand when the Jubilees are, sabbatical and Jubilees. And for us, when we start looking at that, we can start recognizing, whoa, the time is very close. And Joseph has been teaching us about sabbatical and Jubilee years, and his calendar is right on the dot, right on the money. So I just want to encourage people. This is his sabbatical year, his Jubilee years. He wants us to show our love, his love through us by loving our neighbors. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
So on the subject of what Sarkis was talking about, I want you to know, when you send money for the widows and the orphans to Joseph Dumont, you were part of. So I first met Philemon. I met him through some other of my friends, and I started being interested in what he was doing, and I started supporting him. And then Pauline got interested as well, and she started helping him financially, supporting him. And then the more we got involved with Philemon, at first I was just giving money so that he could feed his orphans. And then I gave a little bit of money so that he could buy Bibles for his congregation. And then I gave a little bit of money so that he could build the fish ponds to support the children. And then the fish ponds failed. And then because it was as expensive to feed the fish as it was to feed the children, and he had a choice between feeding the fish and feeding the children, and he chose the children. Hallelujah. And then a piece of land became available. And so we participated in helping him purchase the piece of land. And then we started buying him seeds. Pauline found a way that we could all help him buy seeds. And then we started helping him by giving him information on how to keep the gardens and tend the land. And along the way, I was teaching them about the sabbatical and Jubilee years. You do not know how hard it is to talk about sabbatical year to a people who are starving. But he heard me and he understood, and he started acting on it. And you who donated are part of helping him do exactly as Sarkis says. You don't just take a poor person and feed them. You take a poor person and you feed him, and you teach him how to feed himself. And that's what we have all been involved in helping Philemon and his congregation.
They've come a long way.
They have come an incredible long way.
Unbelievable. Yep. And the faith that's built up in just that process is amazing.
Yep. And every week there are more things that he learns and he takes to his congregation. And like today, he says, "You mean we're not supposed to cook on Shabbat?" And last night, so I usually write about 5-6 pages, and it takes me about an hour for me to read a phrase. He translates a phrase. If I have scripture verses in there, somebody in the congregation reads the scripture verses. It takes me about an hour to do about 5-6 pages. But I've been teaching through those traditional 1-year Torah portions. But when we got to the last of the plagues, I wanted to do the plague of the death of the firstborn all at once and teach about Passover, because here we are just before Passover. And so I did all of Exodus 12 yesterday, and it took me 2.5 hours. And so I was up until 2:30. And it was hard because he had bad connections, and they had trouble getting people to volunteer to read. And anyhow, it was an event, let me tell you. And I will keep on teaching as long as he wants me there.
Oh, I'm sure he welcomes it.
Yes. And, we may end up going to Kenya, It's exciting. It's exciting because when we first started talking about the orphan and the widow tithe, Joe says, no, I don't want to get involved in that. He says, what you really need to do is you need to find your own widow, and you need to support your own widow. And it's not just about the money you're giving her, but it's about the relationship you're building. Well, that's exactly what's happened with Philemon. I've built a relationship with him, and it's been really good.
But he's a brother.
He's a brother.
He's in Torah, and that's where it was difficult to give just to anyone. You want to give to your brothers in Torah first, and then if you have an abundance, you can start moving out from there. But I had a hard time finding, people in the same mindset in this area to give to. But that's what was so nice about, giving it to Joe to filter to where it has to go, because this is where everyone is. Right. These people, all of you know somebody or can direct it where it has to go. And it's well used, and it expands the Torah. It does what it's supposed to do.
Ella?
I just had a thought. I don't think Sarkis was here when I spoke earlier at the beginning. And just to say that it's a confirmation to what I felt the Father put on my heart about loving him first and loving one another. He was confirming that a couple times. And I think it's just an awesome thing to feel and know that you heard from the Father, that that's the truth that he wants us to understand and to walk out. It was awesome.
Some of these new features in the chat are not good. You scroll across it and then get pictures everywhere. Shane just said, I would recommend at least once experiencing the live version of Sombra's teaching that Sombra did last night for the first time. It was a real blessing to see. So what he's saying is Shane joined us last night, and he didn't stay for the whole thing, but just to experience what it's like to come into the presence of the Luo congregation and seeing what it's like for them to be learning and for them to be rejoicing, for them to be having the aha moments and understanding. And I say a phrase, I've written, like I said, usually I write 6 pages, and I say a phrase, and it's something that really resonates with Philemon. And Philemon has all of Joe's books, and I think he's read 3 or 4 of Joe's books so far. But so he has a deeper understanding than what his congregation does. So I'll say something, and then he'll he really puts his whole body into it, and he's expressing it. And I'll say a phrase that's this long, but it takes him this long to translate it, because he's not just translating, he's illuminating what I'm saying, because he understands, and he's building his understanding as he goes. And it's really a wonderful experience. And so I encourage you all to find somebody to share with that you can have that experience with too, because it's really great. It's really great. Sarkis, you still have your hand up, or is that a new?
It's a new one.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I've been listening for a while, so I had to change my computer and pad. But what started earlier when Glenn was talking is about the soil, about the plants, and I don't mean to change the subject, but I'm bringing it in a full circle, and then that is this: when just like if we don't take care of the relationship we have with Abba, Father, with Jehovah, and as a result, not building that relationship with our neighbor, the soil is the same relationship. It's okay. Our relationship with the earth, with the soil is and crops is the same thing. If we don't take care of the soil, we will not have good crops eventually. And it's all about the relationship between our Abba Father and our neighbors, our brothers and sisters. So let me give you some field reports that I've been, I haven't worked for 7 months. So this last 2 weeks, I start working again. And out in the field, meeting with growers, meeting with science researchers, top researchers about what's going on in the field. And one of the biggest issues they've been dealing with is soil-borne diseases, where there's a lot of fungus, like fusarium wilt, and there are new types of fusariums. They're like root rots, phytophthora, where the crown rots. They're all soil-borne diseases that it's killing the plants, and it's reducing the yield down to 25–50% of
They're
the
using
crop.
Roundup? They're using any Roundup?
They do, but has nothing to do with that.
Okay.
Has nothing to do that. So my specialty is I converted. Everybody's pointing finger on that.
I know.
Does it have it? Maybe, but it has
Long
to
term,
do.
I know it does.
Yes, but it has to do with a lot of other issues, and so I dealt with it when I was helping last 2 years dealing with the previous company I was working with, where we encountered fusarium wilt and phytophthora, root rots, and all kind. We were able to manage it. Almost got rid of it, but not all. And there are techniques to do that. But the researcher I met with Wednesday, we were talking, they're top pathologists in the country. And basically they have two recommendations. One is follow the ground. What does that tell you? Hey, you missed out on sabbatical and Jubilee years, and you're paying the price for not taking care, for not listening to Jehovah's command. Follow the ground, let it rest. Basically, that was one of the answers. It was on the top one. The second one was you need to do cover crop. But the way they were promoting it, it's different. What we do, and I've been doing it for 30 years, is multi-species crop, a cover crop we do that literally helps with eliminating soil diseases. And so the issue here is just putting it back together is when we don't listen to Abba Father's instruction of following the ground to give it rest, we're gonna have problems. The soil will get sick. On the other hand, if we don't manage it properly, then it's just like we don't manage the instructions that was given to us in terms of to love our neighbors, we're gonna have a sick society. Look at our society, so sick. with all the problems we're having, and from homelessness, from drug addict, from broken homes, from moral values, just what is right is wrong, what is good is evil, and what is evil is good. So we're seeing that it's all the relationship. It's the same thing. The imagery is right there. When I look at the soil and the crop, I look at, listening to Abba Father, but at the same time, here's the result if I don't listen. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to suffer, and our society, we're going to suffer. And that's what we're seeing today. And people are crying for solutions. So when I'm meeting with people and say, follow the ground, are you aware the scripture says, you need to have sabbatical years for the land? Have you heard about that? Let's talk about it. And so it's a nice conversational piece and I plant seeds. And so I share those truths with people, with believers and non-believers, reminding them, hey, listen, you can't just ignore what the Creator has said. He knows what he created, and he gave us instructions how to do it. If I want to love my neighbor, I need to, same thing, learn how to keep his command, taking care of the land, because that land is going to take care of me and my neighbor. So it's a very interesting subject. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we have finished the interview for today, and so we will close out the recording. I'm just going to do the closing prayer. Yeah, let's do the closing prayer anyhow. We didn't do the Torah service today, but let's do the closing prayer anyhow. And then Stuart will give us any closing announcements. Okay. וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי יהוה ביד משה. This is the Torah that Moses placed before the children of Israel upon the command of Jehovah through Moses' hand. Etzram hi למקזיקים בה ותומכיה מאושר. דרכיה דרכי נועם וכל נתיבותיה shalom. It is a tree of life for those who grasp it. Its supporters are praiseworthy. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Do we have somebody to do the closing prayer?
Well, I'm wondering if Glenn would be willing to close out the prayer. Wonderful. Thank you, Glenn.
Okay. Jehovah, thank you for today. Thank you for your Sabbath. Thank you for giving us the topic of the sabbatical year to discuss. Thank you for the information you've given us in your Torah to keep it. We ask you, please give all of us, every one of us, the individual words, understanding that we need to keep the sabbatical year as you would have us do. Thank you so much for this week. We look forward to coming to see you next week. And in the meantime, Father, please be with every one of us in our daily life in this world. And please heal us, any of us that have any issues physically or mentally. We appreciate you with all our heart, mind, and soul as we are here, and we love you. We want to continue to do your will in your Torah. Thank you. And in Yeshua's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much, Glenn. So we're very blessed to have had Glenn and Sombra as well as Benedict Beuno speak to us today and to share, and thank everyone here who's contributed and has listened and has spoken up and given us their perspectives, as well as tying this all back to Torah. So wonder what a wonderful day this was. Those of you who are watching on video, you are welcome to join us at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in North America. Every day we have these Shabbat services. At 12:30, we start off with a little bit of chit chat. Then we have worship time, and then we have a prayer time as well. So you're welcome to join us. And also go to sightedmoon.com to look for past videos, past recordings, as well as the weekly newsletter, and sign up. So with that, we'll wish you all Shabbat Shalom and hope to see you next time.